In a small village, a boy wearing a cape and holding a stick declares with complete seriousness that he is a wizard. A girl eagerly joins the game, challenging him by claiming she is a monster that eats wizards. Without hesitation, the boy prepares to cast his spell. He takes a deep breath, concentrating all his imaginary energy into the wooden stick, and then, fully committed to the role, swings it for real and hits the girl on the head. Furious, the girl protests that he actually hit her, with the flawless logic only a child can possess. He replies that monsters are supposed to lose to wizards. The childish argument continues until the girl demands to be a wizard too, but the boy stubbornly refuses. An old man watches them from a distance with an amused smile. The children call him Grandpa Rabbis. He approaches with 2 other villagers, commenting on how much energy the little ones have so early in the morning. Young Turan, full of excitement, asks Rabbis what it takes to become a wizard, but his friend interrupts, insisting that it is not something you can achieve just by wishing for it. Rabbis explains that wizards are the pinnacle of humanity, nobles and knights, who rule over others and inherit their powers from ancient ancestors. Then, with blunt finality, he tells the children that for that very reason, neither of them will ever become wizards. One of the villagers scolds him for being so harsh. Rabbis's expression grows serious as he confirms a troubling rumor. A monster has appeared. The atmosphere tightens instantly. In a grave tone, he explains that a man named Rob encountered it the night before a dark beast the size of a house, shaped like a leopard and wrapped in shadows. A woman quickly tries to calm the frightened girl, assuring her there is nothing to fear because the village chief has gone to the city to request a wizard. She trusts that a wizard will come and defeat the monster, and that seems to ease some of the tension. The mother firmly warns her daughter to stay away from the forest for the time being. Rabbis leans on his staff and reminds everyone to be cautious. Without a wizard, killing a monster is practically impossible. When asked whether everyone in the village knows, he confirms that they do. Then someone asks about him, the shepherd who lives on Israel Hill, visible in the distance beyond the village. The scene shifts to the hill, where sheep graze peacefully in the green fields. In the middle of it all, a young man lies on the grass, taking a nap among his flock. It is Turan, now grown. He slowly opens his eyes, a blade of grass hanging from his mouth. His expression one of complete indifference. Stretching lazily, surrounded by the gentle bleating of sheep, he complains aloud about his boredom. To Turan, life is an endless routine, the same landscape, the same sheep grazing without a care, the same day repeating over and over on his small, isolated farm. Nothing ever changes. He even thinks that if things continue this way, he might forget how to speak from lack of company. A voice suddenly breaks his thoughts, calling him a pathetic brat. It is Rabbis, who has climbed the hill to scold him for loafing around before sunset. Without even looking at him, Turan tells him to move because he is blocking the sun. Offended, Rabbis mutters about his lack of manners and asks if he is still holding a grudge over that incident in the past. Turan repeats his words as if he does not remember. With irritation, Rabbis reminds him of the time after Turan's mother died, when Rabbis tried to claim the sheep as shared property. Turan stands up and makes it clear that he is not generous enough to share his mother's inheritance. They are not close, he says. So if Rabbis has something to say, he should say it and leave. Rabbis flares up, calling him a brat. But Turan's cold, defiant stare stops him short. Intimidated, Rabbis abruptly changes the subject and tells him about the monster. Turan turns slightly surprised, gently stroking one of his sheep as Rabbis explains that it is a leopard the size of a house and that he has just finished warning the villagers. Turan calmly remarks that it sounds serious. Rabbis, unsettled by his lack of fear, asks if he is not worried, since he is likely the nearest target. He warns him to be careful and repeats that the chief has gone to fetch a wizard. Turan simply sits with his back turned. Rabbis claims he came because he was worried about him, but Turan dryly calls him out, asking why he will not admit that he is really worried about the sheep instead. Rabbis falls silent. With a mocking smile, Turan tells the old man to leave if he has finished talking, and adds one last insult that his breath smells bad enough to rot his nose. Furious, Rabbis storms off, muttering curses, while Turan watches with a satisfied grin before returning to his flock. Yet the word monster lingers in his mind. Beasts with mysterious powers and magic. Just as humans have wizards, beasts have monsters. One sheep nudges him curiously. The idea that a wizard would visit such a remote village for a single monster feels strange. Still, it means he might finally see one in person. As he walks with his flock, he doubts that any wizard sent to a tiny village like this would be particularly impressive. Even so, the thought sparks his curiosity. With a faint smile, he wonders how strong they truly are. Then, suddenly, his sharp sense of smell catches something. His expression changes instantly. A metallic, familiar scent drifts through the air. There is no mistake, it is blood, and it is coming from the nearby forest. The sun begins to set, staining the trees in an ominous orange glow. Determined to investigate, Turan steps into the woods, following the scent as it grows stronger with each step. He stops abruptly. He has found the source. His gaze settles on the scene before him, his face unreadable despite the horror. On the ground lies Rabus's mutilated body, surrounded by a pool of blood. With chilling calm, Turan murmurs that despite warning him to be careful, the old man was the first to fall. The smell had come from him. Kneeling down, he examines the wounds. No ordinary wild animal could have done this. The sheer brutality leaves only one conclusion: it was the monster. A sudden noise behind him snaps him to attention. A massive claw slams into the ground with tremendous force, an orb glowing at its center. From the shadows emerges a towering creature made of rock and dark energy, growling menacingly. Turan slowly turns to face it, not a trace of fear on his face. Standing before the overwhelming beast, he remains completely still, studying it with unsettling calm. A memory surfaces. A young Turan once asked how strong monsters really were, and whether adults could defeat them. His father had answered that they were incredibly strong. If an ordinary adult like him faced one, he would not even be able to gather his own bones afterward. The boy had realized with growing fear that not even his father could win. Worried, he had asked what would happen to their village. His father, serving him breakfast, had reassured him that the chief would bring a wizard, and the wizard would subdue the monster. With shining eyes, the boy had asked if the wizard would not lose, if he would truly punish the monster. His father had smiled confidently and said, "Of course, wizards are magnificent beings born with magic. They can kill a monster with a single word." The memory fades, and the present returns with the monster roaring before him. Turan recalls his father's words about the power of wizards. A faint smile forms on his lips. It seems he is about to test that theory. With icy authority, he speaks a single word: "Die." The monster freezes for a moment, confused, but nothing happens. The command has no effect. The creature remains intact, its growl deepening as its aura intensifies, filling the air with crushing pressure. Turan's order of death has failed. He sighs, adjusting his clothes as if he were not standing before a lethal beast. It doesn't work. His calm is deeply unsettling. Enraged, the monster lunges at him, ready to tear him apart. Yet with the same composure, Turan utters another word: "Stop." The creature continues its charge, utterly ignoring the command. A faint smile forms on Turan's face. He already knew that simply commanding it to die would not work, but not even stopping it. It seems he is calmly testing the limits of his power. The monster raises its massive claws, its body glowing with destructive energy as it prepares to crush him. The beast roars, ready to deliver the final blow. The time for playing around is over. At the last second, Turan leaps backward with surprising agility, narrowly avoiding the strike. His expression turns serious as he murmurs under his breath, "In that case, it's time to change strategies." From his pocket, he pulls out something completely unexpected: a simple stone. With cold determination, he declares that a shepherd must do what a shepherd does. He places the stone into a sling he retrieves from his clothing. The monster charges again, without giving him even a moment to breathe. But Turan is ready. Holding the sling firmly, he speaks his first true command: "Harden." The stone lets out a sharp crack as it instantly compacts, becoming unnaturally dense. His grip tightens. The stone now hums with an eerie power. His eyes glow with golden light as he gives the second order: "Accelerate." He begins to spin the sling, building incredible speed. The air around him distorts from the force. Pivoting on his foot, he channels all his energy into the throw. With a piercing gaze, he releases the stone and shouts the third command: "Pierce." The projectile shoots forward like a beam of light, leaving behind a trail of pure energy. It slams into the monster with devastating force, unleashing an explosion of blue energy that tears through its rocky armor. The stone passes cleanly through the creature, ripping a massive chunk from its body. Fragments of rock and dark fluid scatter through the air. The attack is a complete success. The beam continues its path, leaving a perfectly circular hole in the monster's chest before dissipating in the distance. With a small explosion, the monster stands frozen, staring at Turan with what seems like shock and pain. Turan smiles confidently. "I'm just getting started." His plan is not over. He loads another stone into his sling larger than the first. The monster, gravely wounded, can barely remain standing. Turan releases the second projectile, and it strikes directly into the creature's skull. The impact is so brutal that its head explodes into pieces. It is finished. Turan watches as the decapitated body collapses heavily to the ground. Yet his face shows no triumph, only clinical analysis. He notes to himself that this is the first time he has used his power against a monster. Looking at the remains, stained with blood and dark fluids, he wonders what he should do with the corpse, perhaps throw it into a ravine. With an irritated sigh, he wipes the blood from his face. Instead of celebrating, he complains that the damn villagers always give him more work than he wants. Turan, a silver-haired young man with refined features, reveals his secret. He is a mage. The scene shifts back 8 years. He remembers the exact moment he realized he was different. At just 10 years old, young Turan was inside his home, happily making objects float around him with bluish energy. Excited, he turned to show his mother how logs were flying through the air, eager for praise. But the figure in the doorway did not share his excitement. His mother stood frozen at the sight. Oblivious to her fear, he ran toward her, proudly telling her he could also create fire and wind. Even now, Turan remembers that moment with perfect clarity. Suddenly, his mother shouted at him to stop. panic written across her face. It was the first and last time she had ever raised her voice at him like that. Confused, the boy could only mumble as she grabbed one of the floating objects and called his name. In a calmer but serious tone, she asked him to sit down. She asked him if he wanted to live with her for a long time, and without hesitation, he nodded. Then she made him promise that from that day forward, he would never use that power again, especially never in front of other people. Her face was filled with deep anguish. Turan, not understanding, asked why. She reminded him of an old story about a noble and a knight. He remembered it well. She explained that although everyone who uses this power is called a mage, nobles and knights are very different. She told him their origin. Nobles are descendants of divine beings who descended to save humanity, while knights are those whose divine blood mixed with that of mortals. She confirmed that he remembered correctly and continued, explaining that this is why there is a clear difference between nobles and knights even among mages, and why he cannot freely use his power. She revealed the harsh truth. He inherited his abilities from his father, who was a knight. Beyond their village, she warned, there are cruel nobles who treat knights like slaves. That is why he must always remember one fundamental rule. No one can know that you are a mage. With eyes full of worry, she asked him one last time to promise. 8 years have passed since that day. Back in the present, an adult Turan stands by his window. He has kept the promise to his mother all this time. As he pulls the curtain aside, he reaffirms his decision. The promise will not be broken. He has no desire to reveal himself as a mage, nor any intention of leaving the mountain where he lives. His gaze is firm. He is determined to maintain his quiet, hidden life. Suddenly, the calm shatters. Someone pounds violently on his door, shouting his name and demanding that he come outside. With clear annoyance, Turan opens the door, ready to confront whoever is causing the commotion. A group of villagers waits outside. At the front stands a large, rough-looking man glaring at him without the slightest concern. Turan yawns in his face before asking, "What is going on?" Facing them calmly, he summarizes their accusation in a way that only enrages them further. "So, you're saying I killed Rabbis?" The leader grabs him by the clothes, calling him shameless. He accuses Turan of injuring the old man and abandoning him to be eaten by monsters. Turan remains silent, not reacting to the serious charge. When he finally speaks, it is not to defend himself. With absolute coldness, he tells them he understands why they want to blame him. The group is stunned. Turan exposes their cowardice. The oldest man in the village died alone because the younger men were too afraid to fight the monster. Blaming him, he says, is their only escape. With a mocking smile, he tells them it is the easiest way to rid themselves of guilt. Enraged at being exposed, the leader shouts his name and throws a punch. Turan effortlessly leans back, dodging it with unbelievable ease. As he moves, he reflects on his magic. It is convenient and effortless. Using the man's own momentum, he flips him over and slams him to the ground. The man lies there bleeding. Turan knows that if he desires something strongly enough, he can make it happen in exchange for a bit of mana. As the other villagers rush to help their fallen leader, he whispers a nearly inaudible command. Fall. Instantly, one of them trips and crashes face first into the dirt. He does not need flashy displays like summoning fire. A small push of wind is enough. With subtle movements, he makes another villager lose balance. A discreet touch to a man's weapon is all it takes to hide his magic. The villager's stick snaps back into his own face, leaving him dazed. Turan calculates every move with precision, using only the force necessary to avoid killing them. One by one, he dominates them. He moves among them like a shadow, neutralizing each man with precise strikes and fluid motions. Their weapons are useless against him. Within moments, the last villager collapses to the ground. This is how he has kept his secret for 8 long years. Standing among the unconscious bodies, Turan dusts off his hands. Once again, he has hidden his identity as a mage. With contempt, he tells them they should have used this energy for Rabbis's funeral instead. His attention shifts to a group of women approaching cautiously. He asks if they have come to fight as well, but they nervously deny it, claiming they only came to see him. Turan's expression shows he does not believe them. Fed up with the entire situation, he orders them to take the idiots off the ground and turns to go back inside his house. As he steps inside, he already anticipates the trouble that this incident will surely bring. He knows the village will use this incident as an excuse to cheat him the next time he goes down a trade, but he does not care. With a confident smile, he decides that if it comes to that, he will simply beat them until he gets a fair deal. Just when he thinks he has taught them enough of a lesson to keep them from returning, loud knocking echoes at his door again. He turns toward it in disbelief, thinking they must be insane to come back so soon. But these knocks are different, firm and measured, nothing like the chaotic pounding of an angry mob. He swings the door open, shouting who it is and ready to confront anyone, only to stop short. Standing at the threshold is not a villager, but an imposing man with scars across his face and the clothes of a traveler. The stranger, gray-haired with a short beard, politely apologizes, saying he only came to ask a favor and seems to have arrived at a bad time. Turan is momentarily speechless, surprised by the unexpected visitor. He wonders if the man is merely a traveler. Regaining his composure, Turan apologizes as well. explaining that he just had someone want a guest. Internally, he reflects that his mother taught him to be polite, but he has never had reason to treat anyone from the village kindly. So the situation feels unfamiliar. The presence of an armed traveler carrying a sword in such a quiet, isolated place immediately raises his suspicion. He begins to suggest that if the man is looking for an inn, he should try the village. But he stops when the traveler's stomach growls loudly with hunger. Turan sighs in resignation. Despite his doubts, he invites him inside. Soon they are seated at a table with a simple but plentiful meal. Turan says he does not have much to offer, yet the traveler eats eagerly, calling it a feast. The traveler remarks in surprise that Turan seems never to have met anyone from outside the village. Turan, serious, confirms that he was born and raised on this hill, and has always lived as a shepherd. It is rare, he adds, for such a small village to receive visitors. The traveler listens carefully while drinking, his eyes sharpening as he studies every word Turan says. Turan drinks as well, maintaining composure despite the tension. The traveler comments that he finds him interesting, and Turan feigns innocence, asking what he means. The man points out that for a shepherd, his manners are far too refined. He suggests that his parents must have educated him well. Turan calmly replies that he learned from his mother, who passed away years ago from illness. With respect, the traveler says she must rest peacefully in heaven for raising such a proud son. Turan answers simply that he lives as his mother taught him. Changing the subject, Turan asked what brings him to such a remote place. With a smile, the traveler reveals that he was asked to handle a puma-like monster lurking in the tense durance area. Testing him, Turan reveals a part of his own identity. I am a mage. He assumes this must be the wizard the village elder mentioned. The traveler confirms it without surprise. Now, it is his turn to ask questions. With a sly grin, he asks if he may ask one, and Turan agrees. The man states that he can sense the presence of a monster nearby, yet strangely he cannot see it. Alarm flickers in Turan's eyes. The traveler adds that what is even stranger is that knowing about the monster. Turan shows no intention of fleeing. He asks directly if he is not afraid, since he would be the most likely target. Smiling mockingly, he says, Turan is far too brave to be just a simple shepherd who has never left his village. The tension in the room thickens. The traveler stares at him, demanding to know his true identity. Turan's mother's words return to him. As a child, he once asked why he could not reveal that he was a mage. She told him it was because of wicked nobles. When he asked what she meant, she explained the cruel hierarchy of the world. If nobles are like shepherds, knights are like the dogs they raise. Even if treated like family, they can be sold or sacrificed whenever necessary. With tears in her eyes, she said she did not want that life for him and asked if he wanted to continue living by her side. The young Turan had answered with a firm yes. Then she gave him a final command. No one must ever know he is a mage, especially other mages, who would separate him from her and turn him into a guard dog, ready to be discarded. Back in the present, Turan's gaze is icy. He remembers why he chose isolation. The traveler slightly unsheathes his sword and offers a final warning. To avoid being exposed as a mage, one might have to kill inside a cabin. The veteran warrior named Kaorn tells his host that sometimes, to protect such a secret, extreme measures, even murder, are necessary. Hearing this, the silver-haired youth looks aside with a dark expression, as if the idea resonates deeply. With a piercing stare, Turan asks why he would say such a thing. Kaorn covers his face with his hand, perhaps regretting his harsh words, then suddenly laughs. He tells Turan that with such a serious face, he is ruining the joke. Turan is completely bewildered. He cannot believe something so grave was meant as humor. He apologizes, admitting he lacks a sense of humor. Kaorn apologizes in return for frightening him, and tries to lighten the mood, saying it was probably his first wizard's joke. Realizing they have not formally introduced themselves, Kaorn extends his hand with a friendly smile. They shake hands, and Turan finally introduces himself as Turan, a shepherd. As they continue shaking hands, he casually adds that he has just turned 18. Later during dinner, Kaorn reveals that he is 75 years old. Turan is shocked, saying he does not look it at all. Kaorn explains that mages age more slowly and live longer. Then, curious, he asks Turan how he ended up wandering. Turan, still pretending to be an 18-year-old, spins an elaborate tale, claiming he spent 60 years serving the House of Arabian, and now only wishes to travel. Kaorn smiles and says that desire sounds romantic. Turan smiles enigmatically, keeping up the facade. Both men enjoy the simple pleasure of conversation, something neither has experienced in a long time. The hours pass quickly, and through the window they see the sun setting. Turan is surprised at how fast the evening went. Seeing the time, Kaorn stands, announcing he must leave. To pay for the meal, he places several silver coins of Arabian on the table, explaining they are of the highest purity and more than enough. Turan accepts and wishes him luck on his hunt, but Kaorn tells him not to say farewell, as if they will never meet again. With a playful smile, he says he might return to mooch another meal or two before departing. Morning sunlight later washes over the land, marking the end of their meeting and the start of a new day. Back in the fields, Turan tends to his sheep grazing peacefully. With a small smile, he gives a simple order for them to gather. The sheep lift their heads at the sound of his voice and obediently cluster around him. As he cares for them, he reflects on the encounter. It was the first time he had met another mage, and he cannot remember the last time he spoke so comfortably with someone. Stroking one of his sheep, he thinks about the calm joy in Korn's voice and remembers the times he visited, always arriving with a smile and a small gift. Of all the adults he had known, Korn seemed like a good person. He had always believed knights were nothing more than emotionless house dogs used by arrogant nobles. Suddenly his thoughts break, and a drop of sweat slides down his forehead as he wonders how Korn's hunt went. Meanwhile, Korn walks along the forest path, thinking there should be no magical beast left on Asari Hill. Something feels wrong. He stops and looks around, sensing that the situation is strange. There are clear signs of battle, yet he cannot feel even the faintest trace of a magical beast aura. Approaching a tree marked by a massive impact, he wonders if the beast has already been hunted. If that is the case, who killed it? He wonders, asking himself if his client might have assigned the mission to another mage instead of him. He exhales slowly, deciding that, in the end, it's a relief. As long as someone dealt with the beast and the place is safe, that's what truly matters. But at that very moment, his instincts flare violently. Something is terribly wrong. He spins around, reacting to a presence he has just sensed. From the undergrowth, a gigantic, monstrous claw with a glowing eye emerges from the darkness. The creature reveals its horrific form, a massive lump of stitched, rotting beast parts, its jaws crammed with jagged fangs, its entire appearance grotesque and unnatural. Keon freezes as he recognizes the abomination. It is a corpse puppet made from the remains of a magical beast. Horror spreads across his face as he wonders who in the world could create something so vile. The corpse puppet gives him no time to think, and lashes out with a brutal swipe of its claw. Keon reacts just in time, dodging as the blow smashes violently into the ground. Even as he evades, he analyzes the situation. If the mana of a dead magical beast is not properly dispersed, it turns into a corpse puppet. No mage who hunts such creatures would ignore such a basic rule. Without wasting another second, Keon leaps into the air, preparing a direct counterattack against the monstrosity. He is certain the mage killed the original beast, yet he cannot understand why they would allow it to become a corpse puppet. He dismisses the idea of a novice, since no inexperienced knight could have defeated a beast of this level in the first place. Only one possibility remains: the one responsible must have had another purpose in mind when creating this abomination, but there is no time to dwell on it. Whatever the reason, Keon decides he must end it now. Channeling his power, his sword ignites with crackling energy, and he unleashes a powerful bolt of magic straight at the monster. The attack strikes cleanly, yet to his shock, the creature receives it without flinching. His magic has been completely nullified. Realization dawns on him. The beast mana far surpasses his own. Suddenly, the creature dissolves into a dark mist, vanishing from sight. Grinding his teeth, Keon understands that the beast can use magic as well. Desperate, he shouts for it to show itself. The monster materializes from a pool of shadows directly behind him and strikes with terrifying speed. The blow lands squarely, injuring him and hurling him through the air. Blood fills his mouth as he faces a harsh truth. This is not something a mere knight can handle. At minimum, it would require a lower-ranked noble to confront such a creature. He crashes violently against the ground, his body battered and bruised. Forcing himself up despite the pain, he watches as the monster regenerates before his eyes. A crushing sense of despair creeps in. To encounter a monster of this level, in a remote mountain, is this how it ends? Yet his despair twists into a bitter, defiant smile. He will not surrender. Clenching his jaw with resolve, he decides that if he is going to die, he will take this thing down with him. He begins gathering every last drop of mana into his hand, preparing a final suicidal strike, intending to drive it in at the exact moment the beast charges. The monster lunges, ready to deliver the finishing blow. With a cry of effort, Keon concentrates all his remaining energy into a single blazing point, his hand burning with immense power as he braces for impact. But in that instant, a mysterious blue light appears from nowhere in the forest. Just before the monster can reach him, a barrier of blue energy materializes, stopping the attack cold. Keon stares in utter astonishment as small fragments of rock float around him. The gigantic corpse puppet lies motionless on the forest floor, defeated. Still struggling to comprehend what he has witnessed, he hears a familiar voice ask if he is all right. Turan walks past him with incredible calm, returning the joke Keon had made earlier with a gentle smile. A shepherd's joke can be quite surprising too. Keon, still dazed, can only manage to say his name as the young shepherd walks away. At last, the truth settles into his mind. With disbelief, he says, "So, you're a mage?" Turan confirms simply, "Yes, sir." Keon asks why he never mentioned it before, but Turan remains silent. The veteran reformulates his question, asking why he helped him instead of simply leaving. With a tranquil gaze, Turan begins to explain, and the scene shifts to a memory of their conversation in the cabin. In the flashback, Keon had asked why Turan worked so hard for the villagers. Turan, not understanding the question, had asked him to clarify. Keon argued that with his abilities, Turan could earn far more money in easier ways. Turan's answer was simple: they are pitiful people. Confused, Keon asked what was so pitiful about them. Turan replied, "What else can they do?" He explained that they live on the fringes of society, trembling in fear without even the most basic protection. Then he looked at Kaon and told him it was not their fault. Those who become mages inherit the power of the gods. Moved by his words, Kaon smiled and agreed. If that is so, then they should feel proud to protect helpless commoners. Though he admitted not all mages think that way. Back in the present, a faint smile forms on Turan's face. Genuinely, he tells Kaon that every person in the world has their own way of thinking and living. That is his answer. A brief memory flashes of the devastating power of the monster Turan defeated effortlessly. Kaon, still unable to grasp the extent of Turan's strength, insists that creature was beyond him. At least a noble would be needed to fight such a beast. He orders Turan to inform the village chief so they can evacuate, offering to hold the defensive line. Himself unaware that Turan has already resolved the situation. A memory of his earlier desperation crosses his mind. He had spoken bravely, but inside he did not know how long he could have lasted. Turan simply replies, "It's fine." Confused, Kaon asked what he means. As a rock infused with magic levitates nearby, Turan adds that if that last attack worked, they will be fine. Kaon does not understand what he is saying. Then the truth strikes him. His voice trembling, he asked if what Turan just did was not even his full power. Unable to process that a young mage hidden in the mountains could hunt a corpse puppet. In a moment of clarity, the battle-hardened knight realizes this was no simple encounter with a country boy in a rural village, nor reckless bravado from a runaway noble youth. No, this was something entirely different. Kaon does not fully comprehend it yet, but he may be witnessing the beginning of the story of a mage who will turn the world upside down. Meanwhile, with a confident smile, Turan admits to himself that he too has been curious about discovering his own limits. In the forest, a gigantic, corrupted specter rises before him. The young shepherd is thrown back by the sheer pressure of its power. Yet instead of fear, he smiles calmly. To him, this is the perfect opportunity to find out where his true limits lie. From a distance, Kian the knight shouts at him not to do it. Despite Turan's immense talent, he warns that the monster is far too dangerous to face alone and insists they join forces. But just as he prepares to help, the specter launches a sudden attack directly at him. Before it can land, Turan moves with incredible speed and releases a powerful burst of energy, intercepting the strike. The impact echoes through the forest, yet Turan realizes his attack had no effect. Kian shouts the harsh truth: you cannot kill a specter with physical attacks. The monster advances relentlessly. Seeing himself outmatched, Turan calmly asks how he is supposed to kill it. Kian extends his hand and reveals the specter's weakness. The answer is simple: fire, or alternatively, an equally elemental and destructive force, lightning. To demonstrate, Kian casts a fireball that strikes the monster's shoulder directly. Turan, unfazed, remarks that his attack did not work either. Frustrated, Kian shouts that that is not the point. He begins explaining a fundamental principle of magic. To affect a living being, a mage must establish causality. And Kian can hardly believe that Turan does not even know that. Not even know something so fundamental. Suddenly, a terrible thought crosses Kian's mind. He begins to sweat as he realizes something impossible. If Turan does not know the basic principles, then he must have been the one who killed the original monster and allowed it to turn into a specter. And if that is true, it means Turan has never absorbed mana in his life. Kian gives him a precise instruction. Don't just ignite fire. You must create it yourself, and then launch it. He is astonished. How can someone be this strong without any training? Hearing the advice, Turan prepares to try again. This time carefully following the veteran knight's guidance. He concentrates, and in the palm of his hand a pure, crackling flame appears out of nothing. Kian watches closely. Creating fire may be simple for a mage, but controlling it requires entirely different training. Yet to his disbelief, Turan does it instantly. With a single motion, he shapes a massive vortex of fire, demonstrating a level of control that should take years to master. Turan plants his feet firmly on the ground, preparing to release everything he has. Then he unleashes hell. A torrent of flames bursts from his hand and races toward the monster. The attack strikes true, engulfing the specter's glowing eye in a sea of fire. Within seconds, the creature is consumed, twisting and writhing as its body begins to disintegrate. Seeing victory within reach, Kian shouts one final warning. Turan must stay focused and keep pouring mana into the flames so they do not fade. You have to burn it all. Kian yells. Turan remains concentrated, feeding the inferno with his power, his gaze steady and determined as the fire devours every last trace of the specter. The roaring vortex blazes with overwhelming intensity, reducing the monster to ashes. When the flames finally die down, silence returns to the forest. Kian looks up at the sky in disbelief. They did it. They won. Still trying to process what he has witnessed, he thinks to himself that this specter was absurdly powerful, one that would normally require a noble class mage to defeat. And yet this young man, this mountain shepherd, destroyed it. Standing among the charred remains, Turan wonders quietly if it is truly over. Kian, still stunned, warns him that if he does not want the specter to regenerate, he must absorb the remaining mana. Turan, unsure how, simply asks what he should do. The instruction is simple. Imagine draining something into yourself. Ready to try, Turan closes his eyes and focuses. Immediately, the specter's residual green energy begins to flow from the corpse. The mana is drawn toward Turan's hand, swirling into an orb of pure power. His eyes snap open, now glowing with an intense green light as the energy pours into him. His entire body shines from within, as though every fiber of his being is being overloaded with newly acquired power. The sensation is so overwhelming that his eyes widen from its sheer intensity. Kian tells him he will feel a kind of pleasure, though he himself can hardly believe what he is witnessing. Amazed, he asks if this is truly Turan's first time absorbing mana. Turan calmly confirms that it is. The knight reflects. Normally, mana grows slowly with age after one's first awakening. The fastest way to grow is by killing monsters and absorbing their power. But this is Turan's first time. Yet he was already capable of wielding magic at that level. That can mean only one thing. His innate potential exists in an entirely different league. Kian stares at his own hand, realizing the enormous implications of what he has seen. This young man is no simple shepherd. Finally, Kian addresses him by name. Turan responds, waiting with a new tone of respect. Kian apologizes for having been rude. Then he asks a question that changes everything. May I ask which house you belong to? Turan, not fully understanding, simply says Kian's name. Instead of answering, he points to the blood dripping from Kian's wounded arm, reminding him that he is injured. Snapped out of his thoughts, Kian accepts Turan's help back to the cabin. Safe inside, Turan bandages Kian's arm. The knight remains silent, lost in thoughts of the impossible power he has just witnessed. As Turan serves dinner, Kian apologizes again, saying it was rude to make someone so esteemed attend to him. Turan insists he is no one important. He reminds him that he is only a shepherd who does not even know who his father is. With a serious look, he asks Kian to stop. Seeing his expression, Kian agrees, though curiosity still gnaws at him. He asked why a mage so powerful would live as a simple shepherd, saying it does not seem like a life meant for him. Turan reveals the reason. It was his mother's request a promise he made just before she died. She warned him that if it became known he was a mage, the people of the lowlands would use him and then discard him. Hearing this, Kian simply says that his mother was wise, leaving Turan confused. Turan admits he is surprised. He expected Kian to call it overprotective, but the knight assures him that she was not entirely wrong. Great power inevitably attracts conflict. As an example, he mentions a great war between noble houses that occurred a little over 20 years ago, a brutal war between House Arabian, which he served, and the great House Sar. He recalls with sorrow that countless people died in that conflict. Of the roughly 3,000 knights of Arabian at the time, more than 900 lost their lives, nearly a third of their forces. With a somber expression, he adds that tragically, everyone close to him was part of that third. The revelation leaves Turan speechless. Kian remembers his friend Dror, who dreamed of opening a laundry after the war. His mentor Hartman, who always scolded him for still having much to learn, and most painfully of all, his beloved wife and son. All of them were massacred by House Sar. He alone survived. That is why he tells Turan his mother was right. The life of a knight can vanish more easily and more meaninglessly than that of a commoner. However, he adds that there was one thing she was wrong about: her son's aptitude. Turan looks at him, confused. Kian admits that although he feels ashamed to say it in his current state, he is a knight of considerable skill. And yet Turan easily destroyed the specter he could not defeat. His potential is not merely that of a knight. At the very least, Turan stands at the level of a nobleman among nobles. His aptitude would be first-rate. Turan, puzzled, asks whether his mother lied when she said his father was a knight. Kian explains that on rare occasions, a child of lesser potential can be born to nobles, and likewise a noble-class child can be born to knights. For all these reasons, Kian rises and suggests it would be better for Turan to leave the hill and step into the wider world. Naturally, Turan asks why. The reason is simple. Humanity needs more nobles and knights. Humans are not yet the undisputed masters of the world. Long ago, other races were expelled by the gods, but they still lurk in the shadows, waiting for a chance to return. And amid that constant threat, the nobles waste their strength fighting among themselves. This era desperately needs strong and kind nobles like Turan. But more than that, Kian goes straight to the heart of it. He asks if Turan is truly satisfied living as a simple shepherd. Turan falls into thoughtful silence. The question echoes within him. What could he gain by descending from the mountain? Kian replies that it depends on what he wants: wealth, fame, authority, family, friendship. Any of those things are difficult to obtain while living in isolation on a hill. As he walks toward the door, he urges Turan to imagine the possibilities. He could wander as he does, destroying monsters, become an explorer venturing into the unknown, or even be adopted into a noble house and walk the path of power. At last, Turan steps outside the cabin. Kian admits that, hearing himself say it, he believes he is right. Any of those choices would be far more interesting than merely herding sheep. And for the first time, Turan confesses that he feels a genuine curiosity about the outside world. Kian smiles, satisfied, though he worries about raising false expectations. He promises to support whatever path Turan chooses. Then, abruptly, he changes the subject and asks him what his bloodline ability is. Turan, of course, has no idea what he means. Kian apologizes, once again remembering that Turan knows very little about magic. He explains that a bloodline ability is a trait inherited from one's ancestors. In fact, possessing such an ability is what separates nobles from ordinary knights. He asks if there is any spell that comes unusually easily to him, or any remarkable skill he possesses that does not require magic. Turan hesitates, wondering if his strength counts. But Kian explains that simply having mana naturally strengthens any mage's body. After thinking for a moment, Turan finally answers. He says he has a keen sense of smell and is quite good at throwing stones. Kian nods thoughtfully. An exceptional sense of smell could indeed be considered a bloodline ability. And as for skill with stones, proficiency with thrown weapons is one of the traits of House Arabian, though it is a rather common one. Intrigued, Kian asks him to elaborate. Turan, confused by his sudden interest, simply complies. As he listens, Kian's expression slowly changes. Turan, noticing, asks what is wrong. The knight clenches his fist as a dreadful suspicion begins forming in his mind. Turan asks why he is acting so strangely. Kian looks at him steadily and says he believes he knows which house Turan's abilities resemble most. With his heart tightening, Turan asks which house that is. Kian's face grows grave. In a solemn voice, he says it is a great house, one known for its hunters and trackers. Images of the massacre flash through Kian's mind as he prepares to deliver the terrible truth. The name he finally speaks is House Sahar, the very house that once waged war against House Arabian. The name hangs heavy in the air, thick with history and blood. Turan freezes, eyes wide. The final piece of the puzzle falls into place, and everything takes on a dreadful clarity. The revelation that he belongs to the great House Sahar, the enemy clan of the man who saved him, leaves him speechless. He looks at Kian, struggling to process the terrible truth, discovering that he shares the same blood as the old man's enemies fills him with unexpected guilt. He does not know what to say. Should he apologize for the actions of relatives he has never known, who are nothing but strangers to him? Kian calls his name, pulling him from his thoughts. Turan can only respond by addressing him as elder. The old knight places a hand on his shoulder and tells him not to make such a troubled face. His tone is calm, without a trace of resentment. Yet Turan cannot help feeling responsible. He insists he had nothing to do with that war. The injustice of being judged for his blood torments him. Kian smiles with quiet wisdom and explains that these are matters of adults. Trying to wash blood with more blood only creates an endless cycle of conflict. Moved by his maturity, Turan asks him directly if he regrets nothing. Confused, Kian asks what he means. The young man reminds him of the advice he gave earlier to descend from the hill and explore the world. Kian explains that if Turan pursues power with his extraordinary abilities, he will inevitably end up joining House Sahar. Even so, the old knight assures him that he fully trusts his character, leaving Turan surprised by such faith. He reminds him that Turan saved his life, even though doing so meant revealing an identity he had hidden his entire life. Kian believes that if someone like Turan were to rise to a high position within House Sahar, perhaps he could prevent another terrible war from ever happening again. Turan listens in silence, feeling the weight of that possibility. Kian tries to lighten the mood, telling him not to think too much about it since he has not yet decided anything. But Turan interrupts, saying his thoughts are now clear. Kian looks at him, curious about his sudden resolve. With newfound confidence in his eyes, Turan declares that he has made his decision. He wants to try going down the mountain. Kian smiles in satisfaction. He approves, but tells him not to rush. This is not the right time yet. Turan, with kindness that deeply moves the old knight, says he will descend once Kian's wound is healed. Despite Kian insisting it is only a scratch, the old man's voice softens, recognizing Turan's goodness. The scene shifts back inside the cabin, where a lesson is about to begin. Kian starts explaining the fundamentals of magic. The indispensable requirement is mana, commonly called the key to omnipotence. Turan repeats the concept as he listens. Kian clarifies that it is not absolute power. To use magic, one must possess mana that is compatible with it. Sitting at the table, Turan asked what determines that compatibility. Kian raises 3 fingers and explains that the difficulty of magic is largely determined by 3 factors: bloodline, affinity, and causality. He begins with bloodline. It is inherited power, determined by the blood one is born with, common among most nobles who are not knights. To put it simply, Kian asks if Turan could heal his wounds with magic. Turan admits that it would be very difficult precisely because of his bloodline. To illustrate, Kian mentions the Ravista lineage of the south. For them, certain forms of magic are so natural they can use them without training, a power that flows directly from their heritage. Turan, absorbing the lesson, asks about the second factor, affinity. Kian explains it as familiarity. A mage more easily performs actions they are accustomed to. Turan relates this to his own experience, recalling how he created a fireball as though he were throwing a stone. The old knight confirms his reasoning. If he had simply tried to create flames from nothing without that familiarity, he would not have achieved the same speed or power. Finally, Kian reaches the last and most important concept: causality. He admits it is so complex that even he does not fully understand it. To explain, he presents a scenario. If Turan attempted to kill him directly with mana, he would likely see nothing more than a faint light in his head and ineffective spell. Kian focuses his mana into a cup on the table, demonstrating the phenomenon caused by the absence of proper causality. The water inside barely bubbles. He explains that when there is no appropriate cause for the desired result, the task becomes extraordinarily difficult. From his seat, Turan reflects for a moment and says he believes he understands. He demonstrates by creating a small flame. If he wanted to kill Kian, instead of wasting mana wishing for his death, he would need to provide a cause such as creating and launching fire because it is a more natural chain of action. Kian rises in amazement at how quickly the young man has grasped such an abstract principle. Jokingly, he says Turan could have been a scholar instead of a mage. Thoughtful, Turan raises another question. If he can control ordinary animals at will, why are magical beasts different? Kian answers that the difference lies in their mana. The lesson continues. Outside the window, one of the sheep seems to listen silently to their discussion. Turan sighs, admitting that magic is not easy at all. Kian agrees, adding that an excellent mage not only uses mana, but understands the principles behind it. An idea crosses Turan's mind. He asks if the Sahur bloodline also possesses a special magic. Kian confirms that they are experts in stealth and tracking. He encouraged Turan to try. Turan stands from his chair and accepts the challenge. Closing his eyes, he focuses. His desire is simple, he does not wish to be seen. But he goes further, wishing that neither his scent nor his sound can be detected. For an instant, light envelops him as his mana responds to his will, activating the power of his bloodline. Kian turns expectantly, wondering whether the young man has succeeded on his first attempt. Then he sees, or rather, does not see. Turan has vanished completely, leaving only a faint trace of light on the floor where he stood. The veteran knight cannot hide his astonishment. A bead of cold sweat forms on his brow as he admits aloud that Turan has succeeded. He cannot see him at all. A muscle in his face twitches. Despite all his experience in battle, the ability is so flawless that it unsettles him. The room, once occupied by two people, now feels utterly empty. Turan's stealth is absolute. Suddenly, the air distorts, and Turan reappears as silently as he disappeared. He clenches his fist, feeling the latent power in his blood. He himself admits it is a terrifying ability and recalls that it was precisely this power the Knights of Arabian feared most during the war. Kian agrees that it is unfairly powerful, but warns him it is not invincible. There are ways to counter it. With the demonstration complete, Kian offers to teach him several methods of magical training. Turan, still aware of his lineage, asks quietly whether he is not teaching too much to a mage from that family. Enemy. Kahorn turns his back on him and reminds him that he not only saved his life, but also took care of him. And besides, he had already told him the main reason. Placing a hand over his chest and looking at him with unwavering conviction, he repeats it. I trust your character. To him, that matters more than any past enmity. The scene shifts. Ta has gone down to the village to announce his departure, and the village chief, Rabis, reacts with disbelief and anger. Turan, already equipped for travel, listens impassively to Rabis shouting. The chief scolds him for leaving without consulting anyone and demands to know who will take care of the sheep now. With a coldness the villagers have never seen in him before, Turan tells them that finding a new shepherd is their problem, and what he does with his belongings is none of their concern. Then he gives them an ultimatum. Either they buy the sheep at a fair price, or he will release them all and leave, abandoning the village to deal with the consequences. The villagers freeze. One of the men tries to act tough, claiming they can simply catch the sheep themselves, but his voice trembles as he looks to Chief Rabis for support. Rabis silences him with a sharp glare. He knows the young shepherd is not joking. He understands that Turan is someone who keeps his word, and provoking him further would gain nothing. At last, the chief gives in. Fine. I understand, he mutters, handing Turan a heavy pouch of coins. Soon after, Turan and Kaon walk away from the village, leaving behind the only life the young man has ever known. The transaction is over. As they travel, Kaur asks whether he wants him to collect the compensation the villagers still owe him for everything they did. Turan refuses, saying he never intended to receive it in the first place. Besides, it was Kaon who captured the magical beast. Noel. Kaon accepts his decision. With a faint smile, Turan announces that it is time for them to part ways. They arrive at a fork in the road. Kaon stops and confirms that their paths separate here. With a half smile, he apologizes for declining Turan's offer to travel together, explaining that he simply feels more comfortable on his own. Turan is not offended in the slightest. He assures him it is no problem and sincerely thanks him for everything he has done. With a paternal smile, Kaon bids him farewell and tells him to take care on his journey. Turan smiles back, saying he hopes the next time they meet, it will be under happier circumstances. He stands there for a long time, watching as Kaon's figure grows smaller and eventually disappears into the forest. Only much later does Turan understand why he had insisted on not treating the old knight with formality. A memory from his childhood surfaces. Though he never lacked his mother's affection, deep down he had always longed for a father figure, someone to look up to. Someone who could guide him toward the kind of man he should become. Without even realizing it, Kaon had filled that empty space in his life. With that farewell, Tehran's past was left behind like footprints erased by desert wind. His true journey had just begun. That journey leads him to a desolate wasteland, a rocky, cracked canyon where only the whistling wind keeps him company. Wearing a new cloak and carrying his pack on his back, Tehran moves forward alone through the vast desert. The wind blows fiercely, but he continues on, adjusting his hood as he explores the new world opening before him. Suddenly, he notices movement in the distance. Something has caught his eye. On the horizon, he sees a group of hooded figures. He assumes they might be merchants traveling between villages. Good, he thinks. A perfect opportunity. He decides to approach them, intending only to ask for directions to the nearest city. The leader of the group, a man with an eye patch, asks who he is. Tehran politely replies that he is a lone traveler searching for the closest city. The man tells him that if he follows the road they came from, he will reach a city called Muri. Seemingly satisfied, Tehran thanks them and turns to continue on his way, passing beside their wagon. But just as he is about to leave, a voice stops him. One of the men blocks his path with a threatening smile and asks if he plans to walk away so easily. After receiving information, confusion flickers across Tehran's face. His gaze hardens as he asks what else he is supposed to do. The man answers with twisted logic. If you receive something, you must give something in return. In an instant, the facade collapses. The men draw their swords and surround him, demanding that he hand over his heavy backpack. From behind him, one confirms it with a malicious laugh. The leader smirks arrogantly and calls it foolishness, reminding Tehran that they are in a wasteland where no one would question a death. A cold blade presses against his throat. They advise him to remove his bag and cloak to spare them the trouble of killing him. Tehran looks at them steadily. Now he sees it clearly. These are not mere thieves, they are bandits who would not hesitate to kill. A fleeting memory of his lesson with Kaon crosses his mind. The calm of the cabin. Their debate about the principles of magic. The demonstration. The moment he understood causality and how to create power from logical foundations. The memory reminds him of the power. He now holds a power he has yet to test in real combat. Back in the present, his expression changes completely. A chilling, confident smile spreads across his face. He looks at the bandits and says calmly, I suppose I'll have to use you for practice. The bandits mock him, but he does not react. He calmly processes the situation. One of the men scoffs, telling the leader that Tehran must be delirious, talking as if he were some kind of mage. Without another word, Tehran begins channeling his mana. A green energy swirls around his hand. With a simple gesture, he unleashes a powerful gust of wind that lifts the sand and throws the bandits off balance. As they struggle to remain standing, Tehran reflects on his technique. It is far more efficient to shape the existing wind than to create it from nothing, consuming far less mana. The bandits lie scattered on the ground, groaning in shock at the force he has unleashed. They cannot believe such power. But Tehran is not finished. He takes out a small vial of water and prepares his next spell. The liquid rises from the flask and instantly freezes in midair, forming a sharp icicle. Soon multiple shards of ice float around him, ready to be launched. Tehran extends his hand toward his enemies. One of the bandits stares at him in pure terror, realizing too late the danger they are in. Without hesitation, Tehran releases the icy projectiles. They pierce one of the bandits with lethal speed. As he observes the spell's effect, Tehran notes that it would be more useful near a large water source, yet concludes that launching them like stones is faster and more powerful. Seeing this overwhelming display, the leader drops to his knees and begs for mercy. He finally understands he has crossed a true mage. The remaining bandits fall to their knees as well, pleading for their lives and offering everything they possess. Tehran looks at them with a cold smile. He steps forward decisively, ignoring their pleas. With a single stomp of his foot, enormous pillars of rock burst from the ground, impaling the bandits who attempt to attack him from behind. The leader, now the only one left standing, stares at the scene in horror, unable to believe what has just happened. Tehran stands amid the chaos, bodies skewered around him. As the leader asks in disbelief if they are all dead, calmly, Tehran approaches the last survivor and says he wants to ask him a question. Trembling, the man agrees to answer anything. Tehran asks why they attacked without a proper plan, knowing a lone traveler might be a powerful mage. The leader's answer leaves him momentarily stunned. It was because he bowed his head. Since Tehran had greeted them politely with a respectful nod despite their rudeness, they assumed he was ordinary and weak easy prey. Tehran processes this with a serious expression. He thanks the man, admitting he has just learned something valuable. Filled with false hope, the bandit asks if that means he will be allowed to live. Tehran's response comes without words. The man looks up in terror as a single drop of water materializes above his head, a silent omen of his inevitable end. Amid the massacre, Tehran recalls the words of his master, Kaoran, who had warned him that he would meet many kinds of people, and that there was something important he must remember. The memory continues. Kaoran had firmly advised him never to show mercy to scum like bandits, people who would never hesitate to stain their hands with innocent blood. hesitate to harm others for their own benefit. Standing beside the body of the last bandit, Turan finally understands the reason behind that harsh warning. He realizes that sparing one life out of misplaced compassion could one day cost the lives of 10 innocent people. With that thought, he justifies what he has done. Having absorbed the lesson, Turan decides he has wasted enough time. It is time to move forward. He begins following the wagon tracks the bandits left behind in the sand. As he walks alone through the desert, tracing their path, an unavoidable thought crosses his mind. I've killed people. The raw reality of his actions finally strikes him. A sting of guilt pierces his chest, but he quickly suppresses it by recalling Kaon's warning once more. People who rob and kill for their own gain, without hesitation, would attack other innocents again and again. Clinging to his master's teachings, the turmoil in Turan's heart slowly settles. His resolve grows stronger. Continuing along the trail, he eventually leaves the desert behind and arrives at a new world lush, green, and vibrant. For the first time in his life, Turan sees a city. His face fills with awe and wonder at the sight. In the distance stands a great castle surrounded by countless buildings. He has reached the small city of Muri. As he steps inside, he finds himself surrounded by people for the first time in a long while. The noise and constant movement overwhelm him. He watches the crowds in amazement, stunned by the sheer number of people gathered in one place. He has never seen anything like it. The architecture captures his attention as well. The towering stone buildings are imposing and completely different from the simple structures of the village where he grew up. Walking through the marketplace, Turan truly feels that he has entered another world entirely. He approaches a fruit stall to ask for directions. The vendor greets him warmly, assuming he is a customer. Turan clarifies that he is not there to buy, only to ask a question. He remembers another piece of advice from Kaon. Whenever he needs a place to rest in a city, he should always look for an inn. Upon hearing that Turan does not intend to purchase anything, the vendor's expression darkens. He snaps at him and tells him to leave. Turan stands there, confused by the man's rudeness. He wonders if there is some unspoken rule in cities that one must buy something before asking questions. Not wanting trouble, he decides to follow the flow and asks the price of some apples. To Tupaji, the vendor replies. When Turan pulls out a different coin, the vendor realizes he is a foreigner and explains that Dupat is the local currency, though it does not matter if he pays with something else. Understanding how things work now, Turan pays for the fruit and asks about an inn. This time, the vendor's attitude changes completely, and he kindly gives him directions. Following the instructions, Turan arrives at an establishment called PBANN, which the vendor claimed was the largest inn in the city. Upon entering, he is greeted by a smiling blonde employee named Lena, who offers him a warm welcome. She compliments him, calling him a distinguished guest. Unmoved, Turan immediately asks the price for one night. 16 Tupat, she replies. He accepts without hesitation. After paying, he tells her he has another question. Lena is surprised when he asks whether there is any monster with a bounty near the city. Turan needs to hunt monsters to absorb their mana and earn money at the same time. Just as Kaorn suggested, Lena falls silent, glancing at his pouch of coins with a sly smile. Turan grows impatient, wondering why she is not answering. She reminds him that in this world, nothing is free, then leads him toward a section of the inn where several notice boards are posted. As she explains how bounties work, she mentions the town hall, a term Turan has never heard before. Seated at a table, Turan asks what a town hall is, openly revealing his ignorance of the outside world. Lena laughs, teasing him for being so obviously from the countryside. Still, she explains that town halls are places where public matters are handled and where the city lord's officials work. She tells him it is probably closed at this hour and that if he wants information about monster bounties, he will have to go tomorrow. Curious, Lena asks if he is also a monster hunter. Confused, Turan replies, "What's that?" She explains the common belief. It is said that if an ordinary person hunts monsters, they can become a mage. She assumes that must be Turan's goal as well, just as she is about to mock anyone who believes such a superstition. Turan asks what she means by superstition. At that moment, a large blonde man joins their conversation. He introduces himself as Medan, a monster hunter, and boldly claims it is a fact that one can become a mage by killing monsters, because he has seen it himself. Lena stares at him in shock. "Medan, you're alive." He replies arrogantly that he will not die until he becomes a mage. With a casual, over-familiar attitude, Medan pats Turan on the head as if he were a child. Turan is intrigued by what he said and asks him to explain more about becoming a mage through hunting monsters. Lena steps in to clarify the logic behind the belief. If mages grow stronger by hunting monsters, then an ordinary person should be able to become a mage by doing the same. Medan confirms that he and his group are hunting monsters for precisely that reason, hoping to awaken magic within themselves. His companions cheer in agreement. Turan asks if any of them have succeeded yet. Medan laughs and admits no. In the entire city, there are only 4 mages, the city lord and 3 people under his service. Medan looks skeptical as he examines Turan's simple gear. He tells him his equipment is to pour for a monster hunter, and asks whether he even has a weapon. Turan calmly replies that he does, and shows him his sling. Medan recognizes it immediately. Noticing how worn it is, he deduces that Turan has used it often. Turan explains that it is good for launching egg-sized projectiles quickly. Impressed, Medan remarks that with that skill, he could easily hunt small monsters. Seeing an opportunity, Medan reveals they were just looking for another ranged attacker and offers Turan a place in their group. Turan smiles politely but declines. Later, alone in his room, he reflects that he has no reason to join them. His goal is different. Lying on the bed, he thinks about the chaotic day he has had. The change has been too sudden. He looks at his backpack, still unable to fully believe that he has truly left his village and everything familiar behind. He wonders what will happen next as mana visibly flows around his hand, a constant reminder of his power and his destiny. Suddenly, he hears soft knocks at the door. He sits up immediately, alert. Who is it? There is no answer. At that moment, he recalls another crucial lesson from Kaon, who warned him never to lower his guard even in an inn. Being in a city does not guarantee safety. The final warning of his master echoes clearly in his mind. Never let your guard down. With that in mind, Turan prepares for the worst. As the door slowly begins to open, a sphere of mana forms in his hand, ready to strike. He peers cautiously through the narrow opening. His expression tightens in surprise. To his astonishment, it is Lena. She steps inside with a playful smile and asks if he was sleeping. She tells him she thought the room might be cold, so she came to keep him warm. Turan stares at her, utterly confused. She loosens the ribbon at her collar, with a suggestive look while he asks what she means, genuinely not understanding her intention. Standing in front of him, Lena repeats his words in disbelief when he calmly confirms what she heard. She makes a direct offer, saying she will do whatever he wants for a little money. Turan cuts her off, asking what would happen if there were nothing he desired. Lena steps closer, touching his chest confidently. She insists he should not lie, claiming she can see desire on his face. In response, Turan's expression transforms into one of absolute serenity like a statue of Buddha, completely devoid of emotion or longing. His strange reaction leaves Lena in total shock, unable to comprehend such complete indifference. At that moment, a vivid memory of his master, Kaon, floods Turan's mind. He sees his men are shouting a desperate warning, "Don't do it." The memory continues, showing Kaon cautioning a younger Turan to always be careful with servants and prostitutes. Cahorn had explained that even if they themselves possessed resistance to diseases, they could still carry illness and pass it on to others, people. It had been a warning not to be carried away by desire and end up regretting it. Back in the present, Lena walks back upstairs, clearly frustrated. Turan lies on his bed and reflects on how difficult life in the city truly is. After a long moment, he reaches a somber conclusion. Cities are cold, soulless places where everything, even a simple conversation, has a price. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the inn, one of the hunters turns to his leader with a question. He asks Medan why he tried to recruit Turan, admitting that the boy did not seem particularly useful. Medan answers harshly at first, saying Turan's arrogant attitude would have made him perfect bait for monsters. But then his gaze softens as he reveals the real reason. The boy reminded him of himself when he was young, and he worried about him hunting alone with such a crude weapon. With a faint smile, Medan confesses that he thought Turan would have a better chance of surviving if he stayed close to him. His subordinate can only sigh and tell his leader that he is too kind for his own good. From his room, Turan overhears the entire conversation, and a slight smile appears on his face. Learning Midden's true intentions changes his perspective. Perhaps the city is not as cold as he first believed. The next day, Turan heads toward a large building in the center of the city, likely the Hunter's office or guild. Inside, a mustached clerk greets him formally and asks how he can help. The man asks whether he is an official. Turan responds with a rhetorical question, challenging him to guess. Finally, he states his purpose simply. I came to hunt monsters. The clerk repeats the word monsters in surprise. Once again, his master's words echo in Turan's mind. He remembers Kaon warning him that the world would not be kind. The world has no obligation to treat anyone well. If he wants to be treated with respect, the method is simple. Reveal that you are a mage. Then ordinary people will bow their heads before you out of respect or fear. Following that philosophy, Turan hands the clerk a document bearing a distinctive seal, ready to test the theory. The clerk gives him a bounty sheet and tells him dismissively to look it over and return it. Turan accepts it silently, ignoring the man's tone. Studying the drawing, he asks whether it is a monster or merely a crow. The clerk replies sarcastically, asking if it looks like a cat. Then he gives an important warning. If Turan kills a monster, he must bring the corpse back to the city. If a mage does not disperse the mana, the body will transform into a dangerous specter. According to city law, abandoning a monster's corpse is punishable by execution. Turan meets his gaze calmly and replies, I know. A painful memory flashes through his mind, a monstrous specter. He understands very well what happens when that mistake is made, and he has no intention of repeating it. He then asks why the knights do not handle monster hunting themselves. The clerk scoffs, implying that knights have more important duties. Their job is to maintain order within the city, not to hunt creatures outside its walls. As Turan turns to leave, the clerk finishes with disdain, saying that kind of work is for thugs like him. Watching him go, the man sighs, convinced Turan is just another hunter destined to die, whose body will be piled alongside the others outside the city. The scene shifts to the forest. A glowing eye of a monstrous crow watches from the darkness, but in an instant, the hunt ends. The creature collapses lifeless, a massive, bloody hole torn through its chest. Back at the bounty office, the clerk and his assistant stare down in disbelief. Turan has returned far sooner than anyone expected. Before them lies the corpse of the monster crow. The head clerk, still stunned, asks if he killed it alone. Turan confirms with a single calm word, yes. Without making a big deal of it, he asks how he may receive the reward. The clerk, now nervous and stammering, assures him that of course he will be paid. His attitude has completely changed. He hurriedly hands Turan a pouch of coins and suggests he must have worked hard and should rest. Turan accepts it with a simple thank you. As he walks away, the employees whisper among themselves in amazement. The crow's razor-sharp wings are still intact, valuable materials. They wonder if it is even possible to bring one back in such perfect condition. The chief clerk notices Turan lingering near the exit and asks why he is still there, assuming he was leaving. The arrogance from earlier is gone. Turan turns and asks a question that leaves them speechless. Are there any other monsters worth hunting? The clerk can only mutter in disbelief. He cannot comprehend how, after such a feat, Turan still has the strength to continue. Later, back at the inn, a table is covered with the most expensive dishes on the menu: ham, cheese, stew, and mugs of honey mead. Lena serves him with a look of astonishment. She admits she never imagined someone like him could defeat 30 monsters in just 3 days. As Turan eats contentedly, she adds that he must have earned a great deal of money. He continues enjoying his well-deserved feast without reacting. Then he suddenly pauses, his expression turning serious. He corrects her, explaining that money is not his true goal. What he seeks is the monster's mana. Images flash of him absorbing their energy, confirming how much stronger he has become. He reflects that his mana has multiplied several times since the day he met his master, Kaon. Yet he can also sense a limit. To grow stronger, he cannot rely solely on weak monsters forever. Lena listens, confused by his talk of mana, unable to understand what he means. At that moment, the cook and another man approach, astonished by the amount of food that has vanished. The cook asks in disbelief if Turan ate it all alone. He comments that despite being thin, he eats an incredible amount. Still, he is happy that Turan enjoyed the meal, as it had been a long time since he prepared it. Turan replies that it was delicious, and the cook promises to make it even better next time. The pleasant atmosphere shatters in an instant when a rough hand grabs Turan's shoulder. It is Midden's subordinates. They gather around his table with threatening smiles, asking if he is enjoying such a fine meal all by himself. One leans in, calling him a skinny runt, saying he has heard that Turan has been earning quite a bit lately. Just as he is about to demand a share, Turan's hand moves with incredible speed and strikes him across the face. The man stumbles backward. Shocked by the sudden blow, his companion shouts angrily. Turan looks at them coldly, pressing his palms together as if in prayer, and asks with dry sarcasm whether that was not what they wanted: a little charity. The second hunter, furious, throws a punch straight at Turan's face. Turan stops it effortlessly with one hand. The difference in strength is obvious. A third man joins in, swinging a stool at his head. Turan blocks it just as easily, not even rising from his seat. With a simple squeeze, he presses a vital point on the attacker's head, causing the man to break into a cold sweat from pain, then lightly shoves him away. The man flies back and crashes to the floor, completely defeated. Lena, who has been watching with a nervous smile, finally explodes and shouts for them to stop fighting inside her. And at that exact moment, Midan enters with the rest of his group. Without hesitation, he bows deeply and sincerely apologizes for his men's behavior. Later, in Turan's room, Midan appears again to apologize once more. He assures him that he has already scolded his men, and that nothing like this will happen again. Midan explains that they have been short on money lately and assumes his men grew jealous seeing Turan's success. He then orders the two bruised and embarrassed hunters to apologize. They can barely manage a week. Sorry. Turan asks if their financial situation is truly that dire. Midan shakes his head, saying it is not exactly dire, just limited. Clenching his fist, he admits that in about 3 days they probably will not be able to pay their room fee, but insists that it is their own problem. To his surprise, Turan takes out a pouch of coins and holds it out to him. Take it, he says simply. Midan stared at the pouch of coins in stunned silence and asked why. Turan explained calmly that it was payment for the kindness Midan had shown him before when he had worried about him and tried to recruit him into his group. Completely bewildered, Midan asked, "How did you know that?" Turan gave a faint smile and replied that in this world, nothing is free. In exchange for the money, he wanted only one thing: information. Midan's face lit up at once. Information was his specialty. With a wide grin, he promised to tell him everything he knew. Time passed in the city. The hunters continued their routines, and life moved on as usual. Turan headed into the forest once more, thinking this might be his final hunt in the city. Midan had given him information about the next city, so it was time to prepare to leave. As he walked, he reflected on their conversation and realized the Information had been even more useful than expected, confirming that Medan truly was a good person, though he lacked Kaon's experience. That very lack of cunning made him purer and kinder. Suddenly, Turan's thoughts were cut short. His eyes widened as he sensed something strange. His sharpened senses caught a sharp scent in the air, one he did not like at all. A terrible feeling crept into his chest. Hoping he was wrong, he burst forward at full speed into the forest. Following the trail, he found deep claw marks gouged into a tree. Clear signs of a violent struggle. He stepped into a clearing, bracing himself for the worst. The silence was absolute. Then he saw a man lying lifeless against a tree in a pool of his own blood. Turan recognized him instantly. His mind raced. Isn't this one of Minan's men? Fear began to tighten around him. His face hardened as he took in the grim scene. There were no signs of survivors. Another corpse with a vacant stare confirmed the massacre. The forest, once familiar hunting grounds, had become a graveyard. Scattered among the bodies were a few silver coins stained with blood, likely the very money Turan had given Medan. Finally, he found Medan himself. Seeing the lifeless body of the man who had shown him kindness, Turan could only drop to his knees, disbelief and rising fury burning inside him as he wondered what could have possibly happened. Nearby, he found a severely wounded man slumped against a tree. With his last strength, the man tried to warn him about a nearby danger, repeating the same broken syllable over and over. Kneeling beside him, Turan listened closely. The injured man lifted his blood-covered face and, with immense effort, managed to finish the word rabbit. Turan frowned, confused. A rabbit. Suddenly, a wet, sickening sound drew his attention. It was the rabbit chewing something with a blood-soaked mouth. The wounded man's warning was true. It was a monster. The scene widened to reveal the full horror. Bodies torn apart across the clearing. Turan understood the magnitude of the threat before him. There stood the cause of all the destruction, a giant, demonic-looking rabbit. Its white fur stained red with blood and its crimson eyes glowing with malice. After witnessing the massacre, Turan rose with firm resolve. He could not ignore this beast. Without warning, the monstrous rabbit lunged. Its speed was unbelievable, kicking up dirt and debris in its wake. Turan barely reacted in time, his expression flashing with surprise. It's fast, he thought. He dodged at the last possible second. The rabbit stopped at a distance, watching him. Turan admitted silently that it had almost struck him. Without hesitation, he counterattacked. With a swift motion of his hand, he materialized a transparent shield of energy before him. Focusing intensely, he spun and launched a blue energy projectile that split into multiple fragments, all hurtling toward the monster. But the rabbit was incredibly agile. With effortless leaps and twists, it dodged and shattered every projectile. Turan quickly realized this was no ordinary monster, it was accustomed to ranged attacks. The creature stomped the ground with threatening force before launching itself high into the air, casting a massive shadow over Turan. Its glowing red eye locked onto him with murderous intent as it prepared to crush him. But when it landed, Turan was gone. The confused monster dashed again in search of its prey. Suddenly, Turan appeared above it, descending with a dagger in one hand and energy gathered in the other. He drove the dagger deep into the creature's neck. The rabbit shrieked as blood burst from the wound. Landing lightly, Turan watched as the monster staggered. Before it could recover, he vanished again, moving with blinding speed. In an instant he reappeared before it, delivering a final blow with devastating force. The rabbit's head slammed into the ground, the shockwave launching its massive body through the clearing and tearing through the forest. A cloud of dust and debris rose high into the air, and from within it came the beast's final cry of agony. When the dust settled, the rabbit lay still, blood pooling beneath it, claws trembling one last time before it fell silent, tongue hanging out, eyes wide and lifeless. The battle was over. Turan approached the corpse slowly, then stood before it in silence. Extending his hand, he began to absorb its mana. A powerful green aura surged from the body and flowed into him, enveloping him completely. As he absorbed the energy, he noticed something unusual. The amount of mana was far greater than expected, even surpassing that of the leopard monster he had once fought. His eyes widened in disbelief. He could hardly believe how much power he had gained from a single creature. When he finished, he turned to the wounded man who had witnessed everything. In awe, the man whispered, "You're a mage." Turan confirmed it with a simple nod. Confused, the man asked why someone so powerful would hide his identity. Turan ignored the question and instead asked if any of the fallen had families to whom he could deliver their belongings. With tears in his eyes, the man said no. In his final moments, he remembered his leader Medan. The scene shifted to a memory. Medan, smiling, told Turan about a great nearby city called Orem, home to a grand library. Turan, who had seemed uninterested before, asked about it. Medan explained that, according to rumors, it contained thousands of books. He noticed that the mention of books had finally caught Turan's attention, though Turan pretended indifference. Then Medan added something crucial: not just anyone could enter. Intrigued, Turan asked how one might gain access. The answer was simple: entry was reserved exclusively for mages. The memory faded. Back in the present, Turan stood before the freshly dug graves of the fallen hunters. With renewed determination, he declared his decision. He would go to the great city of Orem. Before leaving, he paused at Medan's grave and softly spoke his name. "Medan." I hope you are happy there. With that farewell, he turned away from the makeshift cemetery and began his journey toward the city of mages. Time passed, and Turan finally arrived at a bustling metropolis. Blending into the crowd, he observed his new surroundings. In his worn traveler's clothes, he felt out of place. The small city of Muri, once large in his eyes, now seemed insignificant compared to Orem. At the city's center stood an enormous and majestic castle, surrounded by a prosperous and well-organized city. Turan joined the long line waiting to enter through the heavily guarded gates. He had not expected such strict security. Watching the guards inspect every person, he wondered if they were searching for criminals. When his turn finally came, a guard shouted for him to stop. Confused, Turan asked what the problem was. The guard pointed at him with disdain, mocking his dusty, worn clothes and ordering him to clean himself before attempting entry. Turan ignored him. Instead, his gaze shifted upward to an imposing white tower, covered in strange vines rising above the city. That must be the library Madame mentioned. His goal was in sight. The sheer scale of the structure convinced him it could only have been built with magic. He approached the grand, ornate doors guarded by 2 sentries and asked to enter. The guard replied sternly that only mages were allowed inside. Unshaken, Turan answered calmly, I am a mage. The guard was speechless. Another guard, Kenia, grew furious, accusing Turan of insanity and warning him not to pretend to be a mage unless he wished to die. Kenia insisted it was impossible for someone like him to be a mage and reached out to stop him. Turan blocked his arm effortlessly. Suddenly, his hand began to glow with a strange red energy. Kenia froze, confused by what he was seeing. Turan remembered something he had once been told: mages could recognize one another by sensing mana and even gauge each other's strength. With a piercing look, Turan decided to test that theory and released a small fraction of his power. A crushing wave of red mana pressure engulfed Kenia. The guard's face twisted in shock as he felt a force beyond anything he had imagined. The pressure overwhelmed him, driving him backward until he collapsed to the ground, weakened and trembling. His companion rushed to help him, asking if he was all right. Kenia could barely answer yes. As Turan watched calmly, Kenia realized his mistake. This man was no ordinary mage. His power was at least noble class or higher. Completely subdued, the knight introduced himself shakily as Kenia of House Baltas and asked, with utmost respect, to which house Turan belonged. With a faint smile, Turan asked whether revealing his identity was truly necessary just to enter. Kenia, still nervous, admitted that it was not. However, he explained that to use the library, one required permission from the master of House Baltas. Turan frowned slightly and asked what that meant. Kenia respectfully explained that he would contact House Baltas at once to inform them of Turan's arrival. The scene shifted abruptly. Turan now sat in a luxurious bath, letting out a weary sigh as he sank deeper into the steaming water. He had accepted the guard's proposal, yet he could not help thinking that everything had become far more complicated than he had expected. He had assumed entering the library would be simple. Instead, he now found himself treated like visiting royalty. A blushing, nervous maid stood nearby, preparing to attend to the honored guest. Carefully, the servants began washing Turan, handling him with the utmost respect reserved for nobility. Surrounded by marble walls, fragrant oils, and soft candlelight, Turan felt completely out of place. Sitting in the enormous bath, he wondered how he had ended up in such a strange situation. The attention made him uncomfortable. Finally, he told them to stop. The maids froze instantly, frightened. Turan asked if there was a problem with him washing himself, but the head maid quickly explained that if they failed to properly serve such an important guest, they would be punished. Resigned, Turan told them to do as they wished. Relieved, the maids thanked him softly and continued their work. Meanwhile, the grand castle of House Baltas stood tall and imposing. Later, once Turan was clean and dressed in fine noble attire, one of the maids could not help but stare in awe. Wow! Incredible, she whispered under her breath. Realizing she had spoken aloud, she covered her mouth in embarrassment. Unaware of the fuss, Turan adjusted his newly tied elegant ponytail and asked what was wrong. He wondered if there was something on his face. The maid, trembling nervously, apologized and admitted she had been momentarily speechless because of his beauty. The other maids lowered their heads shyly in agreement. With a gentle smile, Turan told her there was nothing to apologize for. However, she quickly asked him not to speak to them so casually, reminding him of the difference in status. The entire situation felt strange to him. The small mole beneath his eye stood out against his refined new appearance. What is this? He wondered, confused by the treatment he was receiving. Suddenly, the door opened and a new figure entered, a young woman with pink hair, walking toward him with confident steps. She examined him from head to toe with a teasing smile. So, you're the guest who showed up looking like a beggar, she said bluntly. A butler attempted to scold her for her disrespect, but she ignored him and added, after a bath in proper clothes, you look like a prince. They introduced themselves. He gave his name as Turan. She responded in turn. The air between them felt tense, yet she maintained a playful smile. Acela wasted no time and asked directly which noble house he belonged to. Turan calmly avoided the question, explaining that for personal reasons he preferred not to say. That answer seemed to amuse her. Ella's smile sharpened, becoming more calculating. In her mind, it was obvious he was hiding his true identity. With a mischievous glint in her eyes, she decided to play a small trick to uncover his secret. Without warning, she released her own power. A fierce surge of orange and golden mana burst from her body, flooding the room with overwhelming pressure. The air itself seemed to tremble. Tehran's eyes sharpened as the force pressed against him. Ella, surrounded by her blazing aura, smiled defiantly and challenged him directly. Show me. She knew that the only way for him to defend himself would be to reveal the true extent of his strength. Encircled by her blazing mana, Tehran stood still. The pressure was immense. A single drop of cold sweat slid down his face. He had been cornered. Then we see that as soon as Tehran witnesses Azella's spirit force, he releases his own energy in response. In an instant, the entire room is flooded with overwhelming power as the two forces begin clashing head-on. The air grows heavy, vibrating under the pressure of their mana. A guard quickly steps in front of the maids, shielding them from the spreading energy. Yet the intense aura continues to surge throughout the chamber. After a few tense moments, Tehran stops releasing his energy. Azella does the same, having already measured and understood his strength. Instead of looking threatened, she appears unusually delighted. She stares at her own hands, almost fascinated, as if confirming something to herself. Then, with a playful smile, she suddenly says, "Hey, care to marry me?" Her unexpected words leave Tehran completely stunned. His mind goes blank, unable to process what he just heard. Noticing his frozen expression, Azella tilts her head slightly and adds, "What's with that reaction? It was just a joke. Still, think about it. At the moment, the seat next to me is vacant." With that teasing remark, she turns and leaves the room alongside her guard, her presence lingering even after she's gone. Tehran remains standing there, utterly confused by her words and intentions. He looks down at his hand, still feeling the faint tremor of the earlier clash. A slight doubt creeps into his thoughts as he mutters to himself, "Her mana is on par with mine. At the very least, is this level of power normal here?" The scene then shifts to another room. Seated calmly within is a man introduced as the Lord of Orem, Rugvaltas. As Tehran enters, the nobleman greets him in a composed tone. "Welcome, young noble. You already know my name." The protagonist replies respectfully. "Tehran." Rugvaltas repeats thoughtfully. "So, you wish to use the library? Many people come here after hearing strange rumors, so let me tell you this in advance. There is no incredible ancient magic hidden in that library, nor is there any secret method to dramatically increase your mana." Tehran listens carefully before answering without hesitation. "I am fine with that. From the beginning, that wasn't what I hoped to gain." Rugvalta studies him for a brief moment before responding calmly. "If you still wish to proceed, I won't stop you. In any case, there is nothing inside that counts as confidential information related to our house. However, it's already late today. Rest for now and come back tomorrow. Is that acceptable?" With genuine gratitude, Tehran bows his head slightly and says, "I won't forget your kindness." The next day, the scene shifts to the Grand Magic Library Tower. Tehran walks toward the towering structure, its height stretching impressively into the sky. As he approaches the entrance, the guards bow respectfully and announce, "Your entry pass has been confirmed, esteemed guest. Welcome to the Sky Library." Tehran pushes the doors open and steps inside. The moment his eyes fall upon the interior, he freezes in shock. Shelves upon shelves filled with countless books rise high above him, arranged in a magnificent circular structure that seems to spiral endlessly upward. The atmosphere feels ancient and dignified, carrying the scent of old parchment and knowledge preserved through centuries. Before today, Tehran had never seen a place like this. His voice comes out softly, almost in awe. "So, this is the library." Just then, someone speaks from nearby. "Nice to meet you, Tehran." He turns to see a young girl standing there. She calmly introduces herself as the librarian, appointed by the Lord to manage the library. "By the Lord's orders, I will explain the rules for using this place." The rules are simple. Tehran stares at her in disbelief. In his mind, he thinks this little kid is the librarian. She raises a finger and begins listing the rules. First rule, if you damage anything, you must compensate for it. Second rule, no leaving with books. Oh, and while you're using the library, I'll be watching you the whole time. After hearing all of this, Tehran nods but hesitates before speaking. "Right, but when I'm reading, could you stand a bit further away? I feel uncomfortable." Then he adds curiously, "If you're the librarian, you must have read the books here too, right?" "Of course," she replies confidently. "If you need to find something, count on me. I'm the best at it." Then, tilting her head mischievously, she asks, "So what do you want? Romance, history, or since you're young, something erotic?" Tehran is caught completely off guard by her blunt question, but he quickly regains his composure. "I want to learn about common knowledge regarding the world." This time, it's the librarian who looks surprised. However, she immediately moves with impressive speed, gathering a stack of books and placing them in front of him. "Most of the books here are hundreds of years old," she explains, "so they aren't really suitable for current events. But this section should help a bit." "Thank you," Tehran says sincerely. "You're welcome." She replies lightly. With that, Turan picks up one of the books and stares at it for a moment. So, this is a book, he murmurs, almost as if rediscovering something fundamental. He slowly opens it and begins to read. As his eyes scan the pages, a spark of amazement lights up within him. This is incredible. Through narration, we are told that Turan repeated the same routine every single day, spending hours inside the library, reading without fail. Day after day, he immersed himself in the vast ocean of knowledge contained within those ancient walls. Gradually, he came to understand the geography of this world, its different races, the proper etiquette among wizards, and the methods by which various items were manufactured and processed. He also learned about monsters that roamed distant lands and relics that dated back to the era of the ancient empire. With each new piece of knowledge he absorbed, the world that had once felt like an endless, unknown void began to take shape. What was once blurry and incomprehensible slowly became clearer and more vivid in his mind. The scene then shifts to the Lord. Standing before him is Turan. The Lord speaks in a calm yet measured tone. So, you have been making excellent use of the library. Yes, Turan replies respectfully. Hearing this, the Lord continues. I trust you understand this separately from treating you as a noble. Permitting you to use the library was an act of goodwill. I would now like to receive payment for that goodwill. Without hesitation, Turan responds, please tell me what you need. The Lord explains. A monster has appeared north of Orem and has been attacking travelers. Turan looks at him directly and asks, do you want me to hunt it? The Lord continues speaking, his expression growing more serious. The Fur Knights who went to subjugate it never returned. They were eaten. It seems a noble will have to intervene personally. However, our house can only mobilize 2 people at the moment. Very well, Turan answers calmly. In his heart, he thinks to himself, protecting the people is what a wizard must do. However, something seems strange. Aren't wizards usually the type not to get involved in matters like this? The Lord then adds further explanation. The northern route that was blocked is an important trade route for Orem. It has been closed for 10 days. So we must reopen it quickly. Upon hearing this, Turan reflects silently. 10 days ago. That was before I even arrived in Orem. So that's why he allowed me to use the library so readily. The scene transitions once more. A large group of people, forming an impressive procession, is seen departing from the city together, heading toward the north toward the danger that awaits. Within the group moving north, someone suddenly remarks, Father really is something. To think he would even mobilize a guest to hunt a monster. The one who says this is none other than Azella, walking confidently at the front. She continues in a slightly teasing, yet critical tone. Are we really that unreliable? Oh, I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying my father is making a huge mess. The man beside her lets out an awkward chuckle and replies, isn't calling the Lord a messmaker a bit much? Young lady, cut it out. Azella snaps lightly, clearly unbothered. The same man then turns towards Turan and speaks more formally. This is our first time meeting properly, isn't it? I am Marvin Valtis. I look forward to working with you. Likewise, Turan answers calmly. With introductions complete, the team continues advancing along the northern route. Azella, still leading from the front, says casually, let's get this over with and go back to rest. As they walk, Marvin leans slightly toward Turan and asks in a low voice, Turan, any chance you're interested in my older sister? Turan immediately declines without hesitation. That's a relief, Marvin responds, sounding genuinely reassured. Suddenly, the men at the front signal everyone to stop. Ahead of them lies the wreckage of what appears to be a destroyed carriage. The remains are scattered, clearly showing signs of a violent attack. As they examine the scene, one of them mutters, was it the creature? Probably. We forbade anyone from going north from our side, so they must have come from the south and were attacked. Another concludes. Turan carefully observes the surroundings, silently analyzing the damage. His gaze sharpens as he studies the marks left behind. Then he speaks up calmly. It's a monkey. Everyone turns toward him in surprise. A monkey. Azella repeats, clearly skeptical. Turan kneels slightly and points to a large imprint on the ground. Look at this palm print here. It seems it attacked the merchants and then went back into the forest. If we find the trail and pursue it, we should be able to locate it. Azella frowns slightly. Pursue it. I can barely use that kind of magic. Marvin, what about you? Neither can I. Marvin admits. There is a knight who can. Before he can finish, Turan steps forward and says calmly, I'll try searching. Azella looks at Turan with curiosity and asks, oh, are you from that lineage? Turan calmly replies, I use this frequently, so I'm used to it. With that, he begins his search. The moment he focuses, he starts tracking the scent in the air. As he inhales deeply, faint traces of the monster's presence begin to appear clearly in his perception, almost like invisible trails revealing themselves before his eyes. After following it for a short distance, he suddenly points to one side and says firmly, over there. The group follows him until they arrive near a riverbank. Turan stops and studies the area carefully before speaking again. It stops here. It looks like it washed itself. Azella frowns in disbelief. Are you saying a mere monster did this to prevent being tracked? Perhaps it washed itself by choice. Turan answers thoughtfully. At that exact moment, The same scent hits him again stronger, closer. His eyes widen slightly as he immediately turns and warns, "It's behind you." Everyone quickly spins around. Standing behind them is a massive monkey-like monster, far larger and more powerful than expected. It roars continuously, its voice shaking the air, and in its enormous hands are several huge stones ready to be thrown. The knights and soldiers present begin shouting in alarm, but before they can properly organize themselves, the monster attacks. Chaos erupts instantly. The stones crash down with devastating force. Soldiers are struck brutally, some thrown aside, others crushed under the impact. In mere moments, many of them are gravely wounded or killed. Turan narrowly avoids the attack, dodging swiftly at the last second. As he regains his footing, his eyes fall upon the fallen soldier's lifeless body scattered across the ground. Azella, using the bodies of two soldiers as shields, barely protects herself. From behind them, she screams, "Attack!" In his mind, Turan mutters, "Mother was wrong." The remaining soldiers attempt to charge forward to counterattack, but the monster suddenly begins to retreat, turning as if to flee. At that very instant, Turan draws his weapon. Without hesitation, he unleashes a single strike. The force behind the attack is overwhelming. A surge of blue energy burst forth like a concentrated beam, slicing through the air with terrifying speed and precision. The sheer power of it leaves everyone stunned. In just one blow, the massive monster is completely destroyed. Silence falls over the battlefield. The survivors stare in disbelief. Slowly, their eyes shift toward the source of that devastating power. Turan walks forward calmly, his weapon still in hand, spinning it lightly as residual energy radiates from his body. The faint blue aura continues to flow around him, marking the end of the battle in a single, decisive strike. After that, Azella and her brother turn their eyes toward the monster, which had already fallen to the ground below. With a cold expression, Azella quietly says, "Die." At that very moment, a blazing fire python bursts out from her body and rushes forward. The fiery serpent rapidly moves toward the fallen monkey-like monster, closing the distance in an instant. Just as it reaches extremely close to the creature, a massive explosion erupts, shaking the surroundings. Seeing this, Turan watches carefully and thinks to himself, "So that's the bloodline ability of House Voltas, pyromaniacs." The soldiers nearby finally let out sighs of relief after witnessing the monster's destruction. One of them says with exhaustion, "It's over." Right after that, Azella looks toward the protagonist and says, "Wow, I actually got chills for a second while that rock was coming at us." Hearing this, her brother immediately teases her and asks, "What, were you scared?" Azella instantly snaps back at him, "Shut up. You're the one who screamed like a little girl." Her brother protests right away, sounding offended. "When did I ever do that?" Meanwhile, the soldiers nearby are busy, talking among themselves. While dealing with the aftermath of the battle, one groans in pain and complains, "Ooh, I think my arm's broken." Another soldier replies bluntly, "Quit whining. There's someone whose whole arm got blown off, not far away." Someone else calls out in urgency, "Does anyone have spare bandages?" Another worried voice adds, "This guy's head keeps bleeding. What should we do?" A different soldier quickly suggests maybe try applying this medicine on it. Watching all of this chaos unfold around him, the injured soldiers, the frantic voices, and the messy battlefield, Turan quietly observes the scene and mutters to himself, "What a mess." Then, after taking a moment to look around and assess the situation more carefully, he thinks to himself with a slight sense of relief, "I guess we're lucky. There are no casualties." Turan then continues speaking, his expression turning more serious as he reflects on what just happened. "Yes, it was a surprise attack by a monster," he says calmly. "But even so, this was a fight where we could have avoided serious injuries." He pauses for a moment while observing the injured soldiers around them. In his mind, he starts analyzing the situation more deeply, considering how a person's body naturally becomes stronger according to the amount of mana they possess. These people should have been several times tougher than ordinary knights, and yet, despite that advantage, they didn't hesitate to push those weaker than them forward and use them like shields. During the battle, just as Turan is thinking about all this, someone suddenly interrupts the moment and asks, "What is it?" Hearing the question, Turan quickly brushes it off and replies, "No, it's nothing." After that, Azella changes the topic and says excitedly, "More importantly, welcome. Come absorb mana." The third person nods and answers, "All right." Soon after, the three of them gather around the body of the defeated monster. Standing near it, Turan begins absorbing the mana flowing out from the creature's remains. As he focuses on the process, he silently thinks to himself, "Yeah, just like the book said, even if multiple people absorb it at the same time, the degree of enhancement doesn't seem to decrease." While they continue absorbing the mana, Azella suddenly sighs in frustration and says, "Oh, I can't absorb anymore. This crappy growth limit of mine." Her brother then responds with a laugh, "I'm at my limit too." Now I understand why father sent him along with us." He glances toward Turan while continuing his thoughts. That level of spell proficiency, and a mana capacity that rivals mine. And to think he's a noble who hasn't even reached his growth limit yet. After some time, The scene shifts as the group begins returning from the battlefield. While walking back, the third person suddenly speaks up as if realizing something important. Come to think of it, if it weren't for Tehran, we would have never defeated that monster. From the tracking ability to landing the hit that knocked the monster down, it was your attack that made it possible. Hearing this praise, Tehran modestly shakes his head and replies, please, it wasn't anything spectacular. If anything, I regret noticing it too late and letting it get the first strike. I didn't think it would have a search ability as well. The third person looks surprised and immediately asks, it had a search ability? Tehran nods slightly and explains, yes, it seems like different abilities awaken, depending on the monster's external traits. The monkey we killed had large hands and big eyes, but it looked nothing like its original form. It probably awakened an ability to throw things with tremendous force, and another ability that allowed it to see very far away, or even see through the forest. After hearing Tehran's explanation about the monster, Azella's brother looks at him with clear amazement and says, wow, I can't believe you figured out all that in such a short time. Tehran responds calmly, explaining how he came to that conclusion. Actually, I looked through a monster encyclopedia at the library earlier. Hearing this, Azella's brother immediately reacts with disbelief and says, the library? That stuffy place? No one goes there. Azella then joins the conversation, recalling her own brief experience there. I went in once a long time ago because I was curious, she says. But it was filled with difficult books, so I left without even reading half a volume. After listening to her, Tehran offers a simple suggestion. Next time you get the chance, ask the librarian if there are any easy books. Azella tilts her head slightly in confusion and asks the librarian. Tehran answers matter-of-factly, yes, the person who manages the library. Hearing that, Azella looks even more surprised and replies, was there even someone like that in the library? The scene then shifts to the library itself. Inside the quiet building, the person in charge of the library stands before Tehran. With a cheerful tone, she greets him warmly. Welcome back, Tehran. The moment Tehran hears his name spoken so casually, his expression stiffens slightly. In his mind, he immediately realizes something. I was careless, he thinks. No knight or commoner in this city would ever call a noble by their name like that. The proper way to address a noble is by saying esteemed one. As he studies the woman more carefully, another thought crosses his mind. And besides, the way she looks doesn't exactly scream librarian. Curious and slightly suspicious, Tehran asks her directly, how do you know my name? Instead of answering right away, the woman simply smiles. She casually walks over to a bench behind her and sits down comfortably before replying in a playful tone. You only notice now, Tehran? Hearing that response, Tehran quietly mutters to himself. As I thought. The library's caretaker then explains with a calm smile. I learned it from your permit. As long as it's around this library, my gaze can reach anywhere. At that very moment, the book she had been holding in her hand suddenly slides away on its own and neatly returns to a shelf behind her, as if guided by some invisible force. Watching this strange sight, Tehran asks politely, then how should I address you? The woman shrugs lightly and replies, I don't really have a name, so call me whatever you want. How about something cute, like my love? After hearing that suggestion, Tehran calmly responds without hesitation, in that case, I will simply call you librarian. The librarian looks at Tehran with a teasing smile and says, you're so stiff. After saying that, she steps closer to him and continues in a slightly playful tone. It feels awkward when you suddenly become so polite, especially after using me for days and constantly calling me to do this and that. Hearing this, Tehran immediately responds with a calm but slightly uncomfortable expression. And don't come so close, he says. It's a bit burdensome. Then, after observing her strange abilities for a moment, he asks seriously, are you a wizard from the old empire? The librarian shakes her head lightly and replies, no. I wasn't a person to begin with. As she says this, several books float around her while she slowly rises upward along with them. She then continues explaining, I'm more like a spirit, but it suits me, right? She goes on to explain her nature in a calm and almost casual manner. When a soul inhabits something living, it becomes a living spirit. But when it inhabits something that is neither alive nor dead, it becomes a spirit. In other words, the library itself is me. This form you're seeing right now only exists to make communication more comfortable. She adds with a small smile, basically, it depends on the user's preference. Though your preferences are kind of. Before she can finish her sentence, Tehran interrupts her with an awkward expression and says firmly, don't make things up. The librarian laughs softly and replies, but it's true that I'm like a reflection in water. To confirm this, Tehran reaches out and tries to touch her. However, his hand passes straight through her body as if she isn't physically there at all. Seeing this reaction, the librarian becomes visibly annoyed. Tehran quickly realizes his mistake and apologizes. Still irritated, she complains, you have no idea how annoying it is that I can't directly exert power on an intruder. If I could, I would've punished every last bastard who carelessly took books out of the library. After hearing that, Tehran thinks about it for a moment and says thoughtfully, it seems like House Valtas doesn't even know you exist. Actually, maybe it's the same for everyone who has ever used this library. Hearing his words, the librarian simply smiles and answers calmly. That's because until now, there was no one with the qualifications to perceive me. The librarian continues her explanation in a calm voice. My creator designed it so that only those whose type is complete beyond a certain level could see me. She looks directly at Tehran and adds with a playful tone. So I guess that means only you can see me. Pretty romantic, isn't it? Hearing this, Tehran frowns slightly and asks, what do you mean by type? The librarian explains simply, it's what wizards usually call a bloodline. Curious about this, Tehran immediately asks another question. Then could you tell me about my bloodline? The librarian shrugs lightly and replies, you should ask your parents about that. Tehran calmly answers, I'm an orphan. Hearing that, the librarian pauses for a moment before saying thoughtfully, in that case, I can check it for you. All I need is your consent to examine your body. When Tehran hears those words, he looks at her with a slightly nervous expression and stutters, examine my body? Is this really how it's done? Meanwhile, the librarian is simply smiling in her usual mysterious way. Without hesitation, she reaches out and pushes her hand straight into his body as if it were nothing more than air. At the same time, she says cheerfully, wow, we're connected. Tehran immediately reacts with embarrassment and discomfort. Don't say weird things, he replies awkwardly. However, as he focuses on the strange sensation, he realizes something surprising. It doesn't hurt, though, he thinks to himself. After examining him for a moment, the librarian begins explaining what she sees. There are a few small fragments, she says, but the biggest parts are the pursuer and hunter bloodlines. Tehran quickly asks another question. Was that a trait of House Sahar? The librarian nods and answers, yes. Then she continues, but there's one more. It was mixed. Confused, Tehran asks, what do you mean by mixed? The librarian explains, it means you're the result of two people who had different bloodlines. Tehran immediately follows up with another question. Then what's the other one? The librarian pulls her hand back and replies honestly, I don't know either. It's still locked. She then explains further. A locked bloodline isn't that rare when different bloodlines combine. As you grow stronger, it will naturally unlock on its own. After hearing this explanation, Tehran quietly nods and responds simply, all right. As Tehran quietly reflects on what he has just learned, a memory of his mother surfaces in his mind. Mother. He thinks silently. She was far too polite and educated to be a commoner. The more he considers it, the more a possibility forms in his thoughts. Maybe she was a descendant of some noble family, a bloodline so diluted that it couldn't even hold night-level mana. After reaching that conclusion, Tehran lowers his body slightly and bows respectfully in front of the librarian. All right, I understand, more or less. Thank you. Hearing his gratitude, the librarian smiles mischievously and replies in a playful tone. If you're really grateful, then stay one more month. After that moment, the narration explains how things changed for Tehran from then on. After learning the true identity of the library's spirit, Tehran no longer spent his time silently reading books alone. Instead, he constantly asked questions about the contents of the books and requested explanations whenever he encountered something he didn't understand. The scene then shows Tehran once again inside the quiet library, looking both surprised and curious as he asks, so there really are that many invisible substances? The narration continues, explaining that the librarian possessed knowledge, even from books that had been stolen from the library and lost over the past thousands of years. The librarian calmly confirms his question and begins explaining further. That's right. If you make water float in the air, shape it like this, and then look through it, you'll be able to see it directly. The narration resumes, emphasizing how valuable this knowledge was for Tehran. Being taught the laws of nature in such clear and simple words became a treasure beyond measure for him. Through the librarian's guidance, he learned that many different diseases arise because of microscopic organisms, and that the decay of living things is caused by tiny germs feeding on them. But that wasn't all. Tehran also began to understand many fundamental principles of the natural world. He learned about the refraction of light, the generation of heat through friction, and the processes behind how living beings are injured and how their bodies gradually heal afterward. Through these lessons, the quiet library became far more than just a place of books. It became a place where Tehran's understanding of the world itself began to grow. After spending so much time learning inside the library, Tehran finally decides to try one of the principles he has learned. Looking at the object placed in front of him, he calmly says, let's start by experimenting with decay. In front of him lies a perfectly fresh and healthy apple. Using his magic while applying the knowledge he had just learned, Tehran causes the apple to rapidly rot and spoil before his eyes. Watching this small experiment, the librarian asks curiously, how is it? Tehran looks at the result with clear amazement and replies, it's incredible. It's not something that existing magic can't do, but just understanding the principle behind it makes you consume far less mana. The narration then explains how significant this realization was, simply changing the way he perceived. The world had already begun to raise his skill as a wizard by understanding the laws and mechanisms behind natural phenomena. Turan could perform the same magical results with much greater efficiency. Thinking about this, Turan turns to the librarian and says thoughtfully, maybe some powerful houses are monopolizing knowledge like this. If every wizard knew these things, they would lose their competitive edge. The librarian listens and nods slowly before replying, No wonder people's level of knowledge keeps dropping as time goes on. Now I kind of understand why. After a brief silence, Turan finally says something that changes the mood. It's about time I should leave. The librarian immediately looks surprised and asks, You're leaving? Turan nods calmly and explains, Yes, the owner of this place has been openly giving me hints that I should go. Hearing this, the librarian suddenly begins to complain dramatically, almost as if she is about to cry. No, take me with you, she shouts while collapsing down toward the floor in exaggerated despair. Seeing this reaction, Turan asks her with a bit of curiosity, Can you even leave this place? The librarian answers honestly, No. Then she immediately adds in a hopeful tone, Can't you just stay here instead? I'll take good care of you, ha ha ha. Turan simply shakes his head and replies firmly, I'll pass. Realizing that he truly intends to leave, the librarian quietly floats back toward the bookshelves. Looking at the countless books surrounding them, she says, This land contains a lot of the gods' legacy, so you should go look around from time to time. Maybe among them, there's a spirit who might know even more about the laws of the world. As Turan begins walking toward the exit of the library, he turns back slightly and says, I'll come visit from time to time. The librarian casually responds, Come if you want. Or don't. After hearing that, Turan pauses and glances back at the library one last time. With a calm and confident tone, he says to her, Don't worry. There are still so many books here that I haven't read yet. Soon after, the scene shifts. We see Turan leaving that place behind and traveling away. As he moves forward on his journey, he thinks quietly to himself, According to the continental map I got from the library, House Zahir's base, the Emerald Desert, is located east of Orem. With that goal now in mind, Turan continues his journey and thinks determinedly, I'll head to Zahar and find clues about my parents. We then see Turan leaving that place behind as he walks forward, lost in his thoughts. According to the complete map of the continent I obtained from the library, the Emerald Desert, the base of the Zahar family, lies to the east of Orem. I'm heading to Zahar to find clues about my parents. With that resolve in his heart, he continues his journey. As he moves ahead, the sun slowly begins to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. After traveling for a while, he stops at a quiet spot and reflects calmly, but there's no rush. If those clues were going to disappear, they would have vanished sometime during these 18 years. The next day, he resumes his journey once again. As he advances along the path, he comes across several dead bodies scattered along the way. Despite the grim sight, he doesn't let it distract him and continues forward, thinking, and if they're still there, they won't disappear just because I arrive a little later. However, as he proceeds further, he suddenly hears a sound. It's a horse. Instinctively, Turan hides behind the bush and carefully observes the scene ahead. There, he notices an injured man lying on the ground. While the horse stands protectively nearby, the horse suddenly charges forward at great speed, attacking the figures standing opposite it. Watching this, Turan narrows his eyes and thinks, a saddle. So he wasn't attacked by a monster. Then this creature is actually protecting him? His gaze sharpens as he tries to assess the situation. Did the attack come from that direction? He wonders. Just then, we see the two attackers. Clearly they appear to be demonic humans. One of them curses loudly, Damn it. How can a mere beast be this strong? The other responds in frustration, Try to find an opening. To which the first one snaps back, Easy for you to say. As Turan observes more closely, he realizes their true identity, dark elves. The dark elves begin concentrating their power forward, channeling a dark and eerie energy. Suddenly, the dead bodies lying around start to move, twisting unnaturally as they are reanimated into monstrous forms. Watching this horrifying display, Turan recalls something he had once read and thinks, This is the necromancy of the dark elves that I read about in a book. For a moment, he hesitates. Should I help? But it's possible that the fallen man attacked the dark elves first. His thoughts remain conflicted as he continues to observe the unfolding situation, his eyes fixed on the scene ahead, carefully judging what he should do next. After that, we see one of the dark elves crouched over a human corpse, casually eating as he speaks with a twisted tone. Whose hand is this? Give me one too. The other dark elf responds without even looking up. Eat your own. You must have grabbed one for yourself, right? Watching this horrifying scene unfold, Turan narrows his eyes and thinks to himself, So they really were cannibals. Without wasting another moment, he immediately activates his ability, Concealment Erasing, his presence from detection. Meanwhile, the second dark elf continues speaking in a disgusted voice. The ones I killed were all men, so they were way too hairy. Suddenly an attack strikes. It comes out of nowhere with terrifying force, completely blowing one of the dark elves apart before he can even react. The remaining dark elf is left stunned, unable to comprehend what just happened. There was no visible attacker, no warning, just instant death. For a brief moment, confusion takes over him, but he quickly regains his composure and shouts, All of you beasts, gather around. At his command, all the reanimated monsters surrounding the area immediately move and form a protective circle around him. As another unseen attack is launched, it has barely blocked one of the beast's sacrifices itself, taking the hit directly to its head. The dark elf grits his teeth and roars in anger. Who is this bastard? Show yourself. Even as he continues blocking attacks with the help of the beast, realization dawns upon him. Someone is using a concealment ability. His expression turns grim as he quickly summons another monster and sneers. Let's see if you can still hide like that. The newly summoned creature releases a strange energy that spreads across the surroundings. As it pulses outward, Turan's concealed form begins to flicker, his figure slowly becoming visible. The dark elf's eyes lock onto him instantly, and with a furious grin, he shouts, "Found you? You damn demon!" Without hesitation, he commands all his beasts to attack. At once, the monsters surge forward toward Turan from all directions. Seeing this, Turan prepares himself for battle. He gathers intense flames into his hand, the fire growing brighter and hotter with each passing second, before launching a powerful attack straight ahead. But from the front, two monstrous creatures, a bull-like beast and a fox-like monster, charge at him with terrifying force. Turan barely manages to evade their assault, narrowly escaping what could have been a fatal blow. Gritting his teeth, he mutters, "It's a good thing I killed one of them earlier." But as he glances behind him, he realizes the situation is even worse than he thought. The fox monster had already sunk its teeth into his leg, leaving him injured. With a burst of strength, he forcefully throws it away, creating a brief opening. However, there is no time to recover. The bull monster is already charging at him again, its massive body moving at incredible speed. Before Turan can fully react, it slams into him with overwhelming force. The impact sends him flying backward, crashing violently into a tree. The collision leaves him in a terrible state, his body battered and weakened. Watching this, the dark elf lets out a cruel laugh and shouts mockingly, "Serves you right. How dare you kill my kin? You'll be begging for death." In the midst of the intense battle, the horse suddenly charges back into the scene. Without hesitation, it launches a fierce attack on the dark elf, knocking him violently to the ground. Caught off guard and humiliated, the dark elf shouts in panic, "Help, quickly." At his cry, all the summoned monsters immediately stop attacking Turan and turn back, rushing toward the horse to protect their master. Watching this unfold, the dark elf's anger boils over. His face twists with rage as he yells, "How dare you humiliate me like this? I'm going to kill you." But before he can act further, another sudden attack strikes, this time with a powerful force involving stone. The attack lands decisively, eliminating the remaining dark elf instantly. With his death, all the monsters he had summoned collapse and vanish at once, leaving the battlefield eerily silent. Turan, who had been barely holding on, struggles to stand. His body is badly injured, and every movement feels heavy and painful. Gasping for breath, he mutters weakly, "I'm really going to die." Seeing him in that condition, the horse slowly approaches him. As Turan reaches out and gently touches it, he manages to say, Right, thank you." The scene then shifts to nighttime. A quiet atmosphere surrounds them as Turan sits in front of someone who has just regained consciousness. At first, the person seems startled and slightly afraid, but Turan calmly speaks. "You're awake." The young man with yellow hair looks at him, confused, and asks, "Who are you?" Turan answers simply, "I saw you being attacked by dark elves and saved you." Hearing this, the young man turns his attention to the horse and softly pats it, calling its name, Tilly. Observing this, Turan remarks, "She's quite smart. She even understands that she needs to protect her owner and move to a safer location." The yellow-haired man nods with gratitude and says sincerely, "I thank you for the grace of saving me. I am Aziz, of the Burke family." In response, Turan introduces himself as well. Then, after a brief pause, he looks at Aziz and asks, "By any chance, is there a reason for the conflict with the dark elves?" After hearing Turan's question, Aziz lowers his gaze and answers slowly, "A reason? No, none. I was on a journey with my servants when we were suddenly attacked, without any provocation. I had heard that other races could be violent, but I never imagined it would be to this extent." As he speaks, his voice begins to tremble. The weight of what just happened finally crashes down on him, and he starts crying deeply, unable to hold back his emotions any longer. With tears streaming down his face, he says, "I'm sorry. The people I lost today were very precious to me." Seeing his grief, Turan gently asks, "Were they your family?" Aziz shakes his head slightly and replies, "They were the knights and servants who came on this journey with me, but they practically raised me since I was a child." Hearing this, Turan silently observes him and comes to a realization he's a good person. There is sincerity in his grief, something genuine that cannot be faked. After a brief pause, Turan asks another question, "How many dark elves attacked you?" "I think that was all of them," Aziz replies. "You said you killed two, right?" Turan nods slightly, then activates his ability in his Mind Explorer. His senses expand outward as he carefully scans the surrounding area, checking for any remaining enemies or hidden threats. After a few moments of thorough observation, he confirms that the entire area is clear. There really aren't any more dark elves around, he concludes to himself. A moment of silence passes before Aziz looks at him again and asks politely, Master Turan, do you happen to have any urgent business right now? Turan answers calmly, I'm also on a journey. Hearing this, Aziz seems surprised. He studies Turan for a moment before asking with curiosity, even with such strength, you're still traveling alone. Are you perhaps the son of a great family? But then, why are you alone? Turan gives a faint, vague response. It's hard to explain. And I'm not actually that strong. After that, Turan continues calmly. I ambushed one and killed him, then struggled against the other. I only managed to win with the help of that red horse. As those words settle in the air, something unusual begins to happen. A faint blue energy starts to emanate from Turan's body, slowly spreading outward. At the same time, a red aura begins to rise from Aziz. The two energies clash subtly in the space between them, creating an invisible tension. Sensing this, Turan observes Aziz carefully and thinks to himself, isn't he quite strong? If I hadn't absorbed the Dark Elf's mana, I'd be even weaker. He really isn't at the level to face the necromancers. So, how did he survive? Does he have great combat instincts? Or perhaps a special bloodline? But if that's true, why would someone like him be traveling alone? Breaking the silence, Aziz speaks again, his tone now more composed. If you don't have a set destination, may I invite you to our Burke family? He pauses briefly before continuing with sincerity. I will repay the debt of you saving my life, and for escorting me safely back to my family. Turan looks at him and questions simply payment. Aziz smiles warmly and explains, we, the Burke family, are vassals of the great house of Arabian in the north. Our lineage is that of enchantment artisans. We have created magical artifacts for generations. His eyes carry quiet pride as he adds, we will craft a magic artifact perfectly suited for you. As Aziz speaks, Turan remains seated calmly, listening to every word in silence, carefully considering the offer being placed before him. Turan listens to the offer with great interest. Soon after, he and Assis stop in the forest to finish burying the fallen soldiers. Assis gazes at the improvised grave and quietly admits that he wishes he could have sent them back home, but that it's nearly impossible in their situation. The blonde man then thanks Turan, not for anything grand, but simply for not laughing at him when he saw how deeply the loss had affected him. In Assis's eyes, a noble crying over his subordinates would normally be seen as pitiful, or at least, that's what he had been taught growing up. Since childhood, he was raised to believe that grief is a weakness, and that a true leader must keep moving forward, stepping over sacrifices without hesitation. But now, Assis is certain of one thing. If strength means feeling nothing for the people who follow you, then he would rather remain weak for the rest of his life. Turan looks at him calmly and tells him that what he's feeling isn't weakness at all, it's simply kindness. That simple response shifts the atmosphere between them. Realizing how well they seem to get along, Assis suggests they speak more casually, since they appear to be around the same age. With a wide, genuine smile, he extends his hand toward Turan, offering friendship. Turan pauses for a brief moment, staring at the outstretched hand, then accepts. Their firm handshake marks the beginning of a new bond, and for the first time since the battle, the tension in the air finally begins to fade. As they settle down, the protagonist points out a strange-looking box and suggests they take a short rest before continuing their journey. Curious, Turan asked what the bulky object strapped to the horses. Assis opens it, revealing a magical cooler filled with fresh food he had bought in the previous city. He explains that the cold inside preserves everything for up to a week, though sometimes the food needs to be reheated before eating. Then he pulls out a magical kettle that dispenses hot water with the press of a button, making camp life far easier. He continues showing off more items, a detector that alerts them if someone approaches, and a tool that helps quickly assemble a temporary shelter using nearby wood. Even his clothes are enchanted, with a self-cleaning function that saves him from having to wash anything during the journey. Turan admits that it's impressive, since magical items like these are far from common among ordinary people. Assis brushes it off, saying none of these things are worth much compared to his own life, and promises an even better reward later. He jokes that if the elders of his family act stingy, he'll personally craft something special for Turan once they arrive. But then his expression turns serious as he adds that, even so, nothing compares to the kind of magic Turan himself wields. He starts listing everything he witnessed: controlling animals, summoning lightning, manipulating the terrain, and asked whether Turan spent his entire life training, or if he possesses some kind of bloodline ability that allows him to master any form of magic. Turan simply replies that it all comes naturally to him, avoiding going into further detail. Assis laughs it off, assuming it's a joke, since the idea of such an absurd bloodline seems impossible. Still curious, he asks Turan's real age, teasing him by wondering if he's secretly an old man hiding behind a youthful face. He nearly chokes in shock when Turan calmly reveals that he's about to turn 19 next month. In contrast, Assis admits that he himself is 43 years old, even though he appears much younger next to Turan. The noble then reflects on how he now knows two absolute geniuses of the same age. He mentions his second cousin, claiming that her talent might rival Turan's. Intrigued, Turan asks if she could create magical items for him, but Aussies quickly clarifies that she belongs to the main family line. He speaks of her with clear respect, describing a person with overwhelming presence, someone who stands above even high-ranking nobles. Her name is Mi, the Princess of Arabian, destined to lead their powerful lineage in the future. As they continue their journey on horseback, Aussies keeps talking, explaining the structure and hierarchy within great families. He says that leadership isn't simply inherited by the eldest child. Among dozens of relatives of the same generation, the position always goes to the one who proves themselves the strongest. And among all the patriarch's children, Mi was born with the greatest talent seen in years. At just 21, she has already mastered blood magic and countless other forms of power, setting herself apart as a once-in-a-generation prodigy. Combat, wielding an overwhelming amount of mana, Turan asked whether her family gave her any special support that allowed her to develop such immense power in so little time. Aussies confirms that she inherited the mana of her great-uncle upon his death, a privilege reserved only for the great lineages. Turan falls silent for a moment, deep in thought, finally understanding why such families are able to dominate the world so effortlessly. The two continue their journey across the vast plains, both sensing that they are finally nearing their destination. Aussies walks with a light, eager step, clearly excited to return home after facing so much danger in the forest. A gentle wind sweeps across the golden grasslands as they advance toward the territory of Los Ver. These are the plains of Dakin, the very heart of Arabian's central domain. Rising before them is the grand estate of House Berk-Sevillan, a gleaming white castle that stands as a symbol of power and prestige. As they enter, they are immediately greeted by a noble-looking woman with an authoritative presence, who rushes toward Aussies with visible concern. He embraces his mother tightly, relief washing over him now that he is finally safe at home. The protagonist watches the scene in silence, recalling the vast age difference Aussies had revealed earlier. Moments later, a bearded man asks his father appears, reminding his son to maintain composure and dignity. Regaining himself, Aussies formally introduces Turan as his new friend and the benefactor who saved his life in the south. The matriarch listens carefully, as her son explains how they were ambushed by necromancers. The moment she hears that dark elves dared to attack her only heir, fury flashes across her face. However, Assis's father quickly intervenes, urging her to calm herself, reminding her that servants and onlookers are present. Composing herself once more, the matriarch turns to Turan and asks which noble family he belongs to. Turan keeps a neutral expression, already aware that his answer will not please these aristocrats. With complete honesty, he replies that he was born to a commoner mother, and does not even know the identity of his father. Aussies is visibly surprised, realizing that they never once discussed Turan's origins during their journey. The matriarch processes this information, and though she promises a reward, her tone noticeably turns cold upon learning that he is a commoner. She informs him that she cannot offer him a room within the main mansion and suggests that he stay at an inn instead. Aussies is left stunned by his mother's lack of hospitality toward the man who saved his life. Suddenly, a cold voice cuts through the tension from the shadows, remarking that there is no need for such unnecessary drama. A young woman with dark hair steps forward, calmly stating that someone who risked his life for Aussies would hardly attempt to harm them now. As she moves into the light, her presence immediately silences the entire room. It is Mesa, the Princess of Arabian, whose pale skin and empty gaze give her an almost ghostly aura. Aussies is surprised to see her there so soon and asks what she is doing outside her chambers. Turan observes the famed Mesa closely, noting that her appearance matches that of a prodigy born from a powerful lineage. Yet to him, she looks less like royalty and more like a walking corpse. Mi explains that she had to come here to hide after surviving an assassination attempt carried out by the Vorms of House Sar. Aussies is horrified at the thought that someone could infiltrate the defensive systems of the princess's own residence. Mi suspects there are internal traitors, as many within the family desire her downfall. Clearly tired of the conversation, the princess dismisses herself and leaves to rest in her chambers. Under Mesa's pressure, the matriarch has no choice but to yield, ordering that one of the finest guest rooms be prepared for Turan. Night soon falls over the Berk estate, concealing the political tensions that have just surfaced within its walls. The next morning, Turan opens his eyes in a bed far more luxurious than anything he is used to. He takes a quiet moment to stretch, savoring the comfort of the guest room. Sunlight pours in through the tall windows of the mansion, illuminating the intricate details of the elegant decor, marking the beginning of a new day filled with uncertainty and hidden intrigue. Turan steps out into the hallway to explore the mansion, walking with his usual calm, almost indifferent demeanor. As he moves along the corridor, his attention is suddenly caught when someone calls his name from behind. He pauses and turns to see Aussies already awake, greeting him with enthusiasm and asking what he's doing wandering alone so early in the morning. Turan casually points to a wall-mounted lamp that had piqued his curiosity due to its unusual magical mechanism. Aussies laughs lightly and explains that those lamps are nothing special, just simple practice projects made by children who are learning enchantment. But before their conversation can continue, the peaceful morning is abruptly shattered. A sudden burst of energy and flashes of yellow light explode through one of the nearby windows. The blinding glow immediately draws Turan's attention, and he steps closer, looking outside with curiosity. Aussies, however, remains calm, explaining that it's most likely me already training her magic, as she usually does. The blonde noble recognizes the phenomenon instantly. It's the signature power of the Arabian lineage, known as the Storm lineage. Turan watches in silence for a moment before admitting that, while he has never hated his own blood, witnessing such divine power stirs a faint sense of envy within him. He begins to wonder just how strong the future heir of the royal family truly is. Aussie suggests they go take a closer look, but Turan hesitates, unsure if it's wise for someone as suspicious as himself to approach so openly. Aussie's brushes off his concerns, assuring him that he'll take responsibility if any problems arise. Still, Turan can't help but suspect that his friend has other motives for wanting to bring him before the princess. With a grin, Aussie admits the truth. Years ago, he trained with me, and ever since then, he's had an unresolved rivalry. There's a lingering desire in his heart to see who is truly superior. With a mischievous smile, he confesses that at least once in his life, he wants to see me frustrated by defeat. The two head toward the training courtyard, where Aussies calls out to the princess to get her attention. Mi stops mid-training and turns her gaze toward them, asking coldly about the identity of the young man accompanying him. Turan steps forward and introduces himself formally. At the sound of his name, Maya's expression sharpens slightly, and she asks in a detached tone what exactly they want from her so suddenly. Aussie scratches his head awkwardly and says they simply saw her training and felt like joining in. Then, unable to resist, he starts joking about the past, reminding her how she once cried as a child when he mastered a spell before she did. Turan quietly observes the tense exchange as Aussie laughs, clearly enjoying himself, while the princess's irritation becomes more and more apparent. Sensing the shift, Aussies changes his tone and introduces Turan as an extraordinary talent, a true monster among mages, one of the most gifted individuals he has ever met. And then, without hesitation, he drops the bombshell. He proposes that the two of them have a sparring match right there and then. Fight, Mi repeats, her gaze settling on Turan with a mixture of disdain and faint curiosity. Turan remains silent, carefully assessing the situation as the tension between them begins to rise with every passing second. Suddenly, Maya's eye glows with an intense blue light, and an overwhelming magical pressure floods the area. The atmosphere shifts instantly, becoming heavy and suffocating. Turan instinctively looks up toward the sky, his expression filled with shock. Above the mansion, the clear sky darkens in an instant, and massive yellow lightning bolts begin crashing down around the training grounds. Mi unleashes the true power of the Storm lineage, her body enveloped in a spiraling vortex of lightning and raw energy. Her figure becomes a shadow at the center of a raging magical tempest, one she commands with absolute control. The sheer force of it compels Turan to shield himself, his body straining under the crushing pressure of her power. His eyes widen as the realization hits him the gap between them is far greater than he had imagined. Just as suddenly as it began, the storm vanishes, leaving behind a clear sky and a heavy, lingering tension in the courtyard. Mi walks toward them with calm, graceful steps. Her expression is cold and unreadable as ever. Turan breathes heavily, sweat forming on his skin from the effort of enduring her overwhelming presence. He is left speechless, unable to comprehend how she shows no sign of exhaustion after such a display of power. Breaking the silence, the princess finally speaks. Her words come in the form of an apology, yet they sound more like a quiet verdict than a gesture of politeness. Fixing her gaze firmly on Turan, she tells him without hesitation that he is simply not at a level high enough to fight her. At that moment, Mesa looks at Turan and says coldly, "I hate to say this, but I don't think you're a match for me." On the other side, Turan can already sense the growing tension between them. The atmosphere is becoming heavier by the second, trying to ease things as she steps in between them and says, "If we're just talking about mana alone, then I agree he's not your match, but what's really amazing about this guy is his talent for learning magic." He then turns to his sister and explains more seriously, "Turan is a magic genius unlike anyone I've seen in my life. Mesa, not even you would be as talented as he is." However, Mesa doesn't seem impressed. In a calm but serious tone, she responds, "Since he's bragging about how great you are, let's see what you've got." Hearing this, Turan, remaining surprisingly calm and composed, steps forward and says, "How about we each show a magic the other doesn't know? Whoever succeeds first wins." As she immediately nods in approval. "That sounds like a good method, Mesa. What do you think?" Mesa, filled with quiet confidence, agrees. "Fine, from what I've heard, Turan doesn't even know what his own bloodline magic is. It wouldn't be fair if I used my unique magic. Let's leave that out, shall we?" Turan steps forward without hesitation. "I'll go first." The next moment, both Turan and Ashish look ahead, and suddenly from beneath the ground, countless plant roots burst out. They move swiftly, wrapping themselves tightly around Ashish before lifting him straight into the air. "Whoa, hold on!" Ashish shouts in panic as he dangles helplessly. Mesa watches calmly and says, "Plant creation and manipulation magic, can you do it?" As she continues yelling, "Let go of me, I'm getting dizzy." But Mesa, completely unfazed, simply replies in a cold tone, "Stay there for a second, this is fun." After that, Tehran looks straight ahead and then slowly raises his gaze toward the sky before lowering himself and placing his hand on the ground. As he does this, he begins thinking to himself, magic that ignites fire only manifests the phenomenon of burning. Magic that creates water merely draws in invisible moisture from the air. Then in a calm voice he says, "Grow." At that moment he starts explaining his understanding. Withering vines are the same. It is magic that rapidly accelerates seeds buried in the ground. In other words, it is not creation, but growth. As his realization takes shape, the ground responds instantly. Thick, massive vines begin bursting out and spreading rapidly, growing at an incredible speed. The sight is overwhelming. The vines twist and expand as if alive, filling the space with their presence. Seeing this, Mesa is visibly shocked, her expression changing for the first time. Meanwhile, even though as she is still hanging in the air, he looks surprisingly excited by what he is witnessing. Mesa then asks him with curiosity, "From the way you said grow, it seems you figured out the magic's nature right away. Have you seen it before?" Tehran calmly replies, "I have not." Right after that, Mesa releases Ashiz and he drops back down. She then says thoughtfully, I guess even Ashiz could be right sometimes. Then it's your turn to cast a spell. Let's see what you can do." At this point, Tehran begins thinking to himself, realizing that using his Zahar bloodline magic would be practically suicide. He searches for another way. Suddenly, an idea comes to him. He slightly moves his hand to the side, and from there a small rat appears. Seeing this, Mesa says with slight disappointment, "Animal manipulation, is that all?" Tehran looks at her and replies, "Of course not, this creature is just the material." He then picks up the rat in his hand, and at that very moment a strange energy begins to emanate from his body. The energy slowly flows into the rat, entering it completely. The exact process is not clearly visible, but within a few moments, the rat grows weaker and weaker until it finally dies. The air becomes still. As the act completes, Mesa watches this with shock and a hint of confusion, unsure of what she just witnessed. On the other side, Tehran remains calm and simply says, "I am done." Mesa, with a strange expression on her face, says, "Perfect, now it's my turn." At that moment, she points to her side and another rat appears in that place, which she immediately grabs. Just like before, energy begins to flow out from her body. At the same time, she starts thinking to herself, "What on earth did he do? This is not simply magic." As she's watching this, reacts in shock and says, "How could you use magic like that? That's pretty creepy." Hearing him, Tehran calmly replies, "It just came to mind right then." Yet deep inside, his thoughts continue. "I did not expect this, but does even a prestigious family like Arabia not know much about it?" Ashiz then looks at Mesa and says, "It seems like it's not going well. Mesa, how about we say Tehran wins?" But Mesa immediately snaps back in anger, "Shut up, you think I can't do this?" At that moment, she begins trying something on her own, and the narration explains what is happening when using magic. Causality is a highly complex element. Whether the phenomenon you are trying to trigger is a natural occurrence, whether the user clearly recognizes the magical cause of the phenomenon, and whether the amount of mana consumed is appropriate to produce that phenomenon. Among these, the ability to perceive the cause of the phenomenon is. As the explanation continues, we return to the three of them, where Mesa is still struggling and says, "Just a bit more." The narration continues, again explaining that it is a crucial factor that affects both the success rate and the amount of mana consumed, and one way to compensate for insufficient causality when using magic is to pour in a massive amount of mana and make up for inefficiency with sheer quantity. At this point, Mesa begins thinking intensely. It is still alive. As her focus sharpens, an overwhelming amount of energy bursts out from her body and flows into the rat. Slowly, the rat begins to weaken as the force of her magic starts to kill it from within. Seeing this, as she says in surprise, "Oh, it worked." Tehran, on the other hand, watches this mostly in shock as everything unfolds before his eyes, and then immediately Mesa says, with a faint sense of pride, "I did it." But at the same time, it is clear that she has become extremely weak. Her eyes slowly begin to close, and in the very next moment she collapses straight to the ground. Seeing this, Ashiz panics and shouts, "What's wrong? Open your eyes." Tehran watches carefully and begins thinking to himself, what is the reason for her to collapse? Did she use too much mana? But she should not collapse just from depleting mana. She should only be suffering from exhaustion, since even the strength to reinforce her body is gone. I see. Realizing the situation, he quickly lifts Mesa into his arms and says, "There is no healing bloodline mage here, is there?" Hearing this, Ashiz replies, "There isn't." Tehran then speaks firmly, "Then bring water and salt to this young lady's room and call the adults too." As he carries her, he continues, thinking she is so light that I cannot even tell if I am holding a person or a baby lamb. From the start, she was barely maintaining a body she could not even sustain, and now that remaining mana is depleted too. After this, the scene shifts to the palace, where Mesa slowly opens her eyes. Her Anna's already by her side, looking worried, and she asks, "Are you okay? Are you conscious?" Mesa weakly looks at her and asks, "Why am I here?" her aunt explains. As she said, you suddenly collapsed while doing magic training with a guest, is that right? Mesa begins to recall everything, while her aunt continues. With concern, did that person do something to you? For now we are keeping him in the temple under observation. Mesa immediately denies it and says no, it is not that person's fault. I just made a mistake for a moment. Feeling overwhelmed, she then says, everyone please leave, my head is pounding. Her aunt gently responds, I made some soup for you. I know you do not eat because of the magic, but you need to think about your health too. I will leave it here, try to eat at least a little. Her aunt also looks deeply worried. Standing nearby and seeing her concern, Mesa softly says thank you, aunt. After that, her aunt quietly leaves the room and Mesa is left alone. She slowly turns her gaze toward the soup that her aunt had prepared for her. A faint hesitation passes through her before she finally picks it up and begins to drink. As soon as the soup touches her lips, something feels wrong, and suddenly her vision starts to distort. In the next moment, strange visions begin to appear before her eyes. She becomes visibly shaken as voices echo around her, calling out desperately, help me, Mesa, I know you can do it. It hurts so much, sister. The identities of these people are not revealed, but their voices feel painfully real, as if they are reaching out to her from somewhere far away yet deeply connected to her. Overwhelmed by fear and confusion, Mesa suddenly drops the bowl of soup. It spills across the floor as she clutches her ears tightly and starts screaming in distress. The scene feels almost like something out of a horror story, her voice filled with panic as the visions continue to torment her mind. The scene then shifts outward and we see a statue standing silently in place. The narration reveals that this location is the underground chamber of Hausberg, known as the Temple of the Limping Goddess. Inside this place, Turan stands, accompanied by a guard who had brought him there. The guard grips his sword firmly and speaks in a serious tone. The doors and walls are all solidified like muscles, trained for centuries without a single gap. Do not even think about breaking through and escaping. His name is revealed to be Haremberg. Hearing this, Turan calmly replies, yes, I understand. Yet inside his mind he is observing everything, carefully analyzing the situation. Haremberg then adds with pride, they are very firm. Turan responds casually, all right. Haremberg repeats with even more emphasis, extremely firm. Turan cannot help but think to himself, is he boasting? At that moment, Haremberg suddenly draws his sword and begins swinging it in the air as if practicing. Turan looks at him with confusion and asks, what are you doing? Haremberg simply replies, training. Turan quietly watches the man's movements, his eyes carefully following every swing, every step, every subtle shift in posture. As he observes, he begins analyzing everything in his mind. He thinks to himself, he is efficient, there are no unnecessary movements, every motion is the minimum preparation needed for the next strike. Is that the efficiency of a trained body? After a moment, Haremberg notices Turan watching him and turns his gaze toward him. He says calmly, my apologies, did I get in the way? Turan replies, no, but then Haremberg asked with curiosity, what did you see in my movements just now? Turan answers, honestly, I thought it was cool. Haremberg nods slightly and says, I see. Then, while continuing his training, he begins to explain. Most nobles dismiss weapon arts as trivial since it is easier to attack from a distance with magic, but it is all because they have weak bodies. The mind does not command the flesh, so they rely on tricks. Turan listens and then responds thoughtfully, unless their bloodline is specialized in strength, focusing on magic is more practical and efficient. But after experiencing real combat situations come up where you have to face it even if you want to avoid it. Hearing this, Haremberg immediately stops and throws a sword toward Turan, saying, take this. Turan catches it, but looks at him with doubt and says, I thought you were keeping me here because I am a suspicious person. Is it all right to give me a weapon? Haremberg replies without concern, it does not matter, this is just an iron bar. What makes it a sword is the body of the wielder. With your weak body now, you could not possibly cut me. After hearing those words, Turan calmly says, true, even if I did try something. Haremberg continues watching him closely, and at that very moment something changes. The air around Turan begins to shift as a powerful and furious energy starts to surge out from his body. While he grips the sword tightly, the calm atmosphere suddenly turns tense as that overwhelming presence begins to build up around him. While correcting Turan's posture, Lam calmly explained the underlying principle. He guided him step by step, placing the center of gravity firmly on the front leg, lifting the arm with control, and learning to overcome the weight of the blade rather than fighting against it. Turan listened attentively and responded with quiet respect, showing that he understood. Satisfied, Lam gave a small nod of approval and instructed him to repeat the motion 10 times without pause. He emphasized the importance of breathing, telling him not to hold it back, but to let it flow into his muscles, as if every movement drew strength from within. Then, in a more thoughtful tone, Lam admitted that Turan's body was naturally well suited for training. If he ever found the time to properly refine it, the results would be remarkable. Though magic was undoubtedly the strongest tool a wizard could wield, Lam made it clear that the body remained the true foundation. A body forged through relentless trials could dominate even without relying on magic. That distinction, he insisted, was something Turan needed to fully understand. Just as Turan prepared himself to continue his training, carefully recalling Lamb's words, the doors of the goddess temple slowly opened. The atmosphere shifted as the head of the Burke family entered. Having learned from Misha that Taryn was not responsible for her earlier collapse, she had come personally to offer an apology. However, Turan did not hold any resentment. Instead, he humbly stated that he was the one who should apologize, acknowledging that his actions as a guest had been somewhat improper. Despite this, she conveyed that Misa wished to apologize to him directly and asked if he would spare some time. When they finally met, Misa expressed her sincere regret, explaining that she felt responsible. After hearing he had been confined to the temple because of her condition, Turan gently dismissed her concern, saying it had merely been a necessary procedure, and that he was simply relieved she was safe. Hearing this, Misha chose not to dwell on the matter further. Instead, her curiosity shifted to the magic he had used the previous day, the spell that caused animals to rot. She questioned whether it was some hidden bloodline magic, as the sheer amount of power required seemed extraordinary. Turan, however, denied this and explained that it was not a bloodline ability at all. In fact, anyone who understood its principle could use it with ease. This immediately sparked her interest, and she eagerly asked him to teach her. In return, she offered to share one of the Albion family's secret arts. Seeing her determination, Turan agreed. He then carefully explained the true nature of the spell. It was not destruction at its core, but enhancement, the strengthening of living organisms. The difference was that the target being enhanced was an invisible form of life, a type of microorganism beyond ordinary perception. Because Misha had no knowledge of such existence, her earlier attempt had been inefficient, relying purely on brute force. Though she had ultimately succeeded, she now realized the gap in understanding between them. Even so, she admitted this with a hint of reluctance and requested that Turan tell Aziz their match had ended in a draw, as she had no desire to see him grow insufferably arrogant. Turan agreed without hesitation. Keeping her promise, Misa prepared to reveal her secret art. She picked up a comb and gently drew it through her hair, beginning to explain how objects, when rubbed together, could generate a force that caused them to attract one another. Before she could finish, however, Turan calmly identified it as static electricity. The answer caught her completely off guard. For a moment, she stood speechless, unable to hide her surprise. Regaining herself, she acknowledged the depth of the technique but admitted she had not expected him to already understand it. This left her in a difficult position, unsure what she could possibly teach him that he did not already know. After some thought, she proposed a different solution until she could properly repay him. They would train together. She made it clear that this was simply to settle her debt, and not because she personally needed his help. Turan accepted the arrangement without hesitation, and they agreed to meet in the garden every evening starting the next day. That night, the atmosphere shifted once again, this time at the dinner table. An elaborate feast had been prepared, far beyond what one would expect for an ordinary meal. The Burke family insisted that everyone eat and drink to their heart's content, but the display left Aziz sitting beside Turan in visible confusion. He could not understand why his mother had gone to such lengths. Even on his own birthday, he had never seen such extravagance. To an outsider, it might have seemed as though a great lord from the Albion house had arrived in person. Turan, however, sensed that this meal carried a deeper significance. As they began, Aziz's mother calmly steered the conversation back to an earlier promise. She reminded them that her son had once offered a powerful magical item in exchange for saving his life and asked Turan what kind of item he desired. After a moment of thought, Turan answered honestly. While it was relatively easy to use magic to harm others, protecting oneself was far more difficult. Therefore, he wished for an item that could defend against sudden attack, something reliable in critical moments. His request caused her to pause briefly. She admitted that although she had created similar items in the past, she did not currently have one ready. Aziz eagerly volunteered to make it himself, but his mother dismissed the idea immediately, unwilling to risk the family's reputation. At that moment, another individual present raised his hand, offering to take on the task. He explained that he had recently completed a commission for the main house and had some time to spare. When asked about his approach, he suggested crafting the item as something that could be worn at all times, a ring, earring, or necklace, so that its defensive power could be activated instantly. The only drawback was the time required. It would take a full month to complete. The head of the Burke family praised his initiative, even remarking with a hint of pride that although showcasing one's own child might seem excessive, Mello was indeed a highly skilled wizard whose craftsmanship nearly matched her own. In essence, the item would be created over the course of a month by someone of exceptional ability, from a lineage renowned for producing magical artifacts. Hearing this, Turan expressed his gratitude but also his concern, wondering if such an effort might be too grand for him. She dismissed his hesitation without a second thought, stating that compared to her son's life, it was not grand at all. Then, with quiet authority, she instructed Turan to remain with their family as a guest for the next month, assuring him that he should stay without worry. Aziz, watching this unfold, could not help but smile as he leaned closer and remarked that it seemed his mother had taken quite a liking to him. He even revealed that the night before, she had spoken at length about Turan, praising not only his magical talent comparable to Mish's but also something far more important, the qualities that set him apart beyond mere strength. Aziz leaned back with a knowing smile, his tone half teasing and half serious as he revealed what he believed to be his mother's true intentions. He remarked that Turan had clearly been neglecting his training, and because of that, his mother had likely taken an interest in recruiting him into the Burke family. According to Aziz, it usually started with generosity, lavish gifts, thoughtful favors until, before one realized it, they were bound by a sense of obligation. And then, at the right moment, she would introduce them to a charming young lady. It was, as he casually put it, one of her most effective methods. In fact, quite a few wizards had ended up joining the Burke family in exactly that way. Hearing this, Turan could not help but feel that such a situation would become unnecessarily complicated. However, Aziz quickly waved off his concerns, assuring him that there was no need to worry. The magical item was merely a gesture of gratitude, nothing more. Even if he accepted it, no one would force him into marriage. His mother, he insisted, was not so lacking in taste. Shifting the topic, Aziz asked Turan how he intended to spend the rest of the day. Turan replied that he had already promised to train with Lady Misha later that evening. The moment Aziz heard that the training was scheduled for the evening, his eyes lit up. Throwing an arm around Turan's shoulders, he declared that there was still plenty of time left in the day. With an excited grin, he insisted that Turan accompany him on a patrol. While Zavalin might not be the capital, he claimed, it still had plenty to offer. Turan tried to explain that he had planned to spend the day quietly practicing magic on his own, but Aziz would hear none of it. Grabbing him by the collar, he dragged him along, laughing as he said that life was short and meant to be enjoyed while one still had the chance. Before long, they found themselves standing in front of a casino. Turan's complete lack of interest was obvious, and Aziz quickly picked up on it. Undeterred, he began enthusiastically pointing out other attractions, introducing one place after another in an attempt to spark his curiosity. It was during this lively explanation that Turan's attention was suddenly drawn elsewhere, his gaze fixed on a large illustrated poster pinned to a nearby wall. The figure depicted on it bore an uncanny resemblance to Cain, yet something about the expression was entirely different. It lingered in Turan's mind, leaving him quietly unsettled. They soon moved on to a theater, where a stage play was being performed. The story unfolded in the harsh expanse of the Demon Desert, where warriors of Albion fought against overwhelming odds. At the center of the tale was a knight named Cain, who, after enduring an unimaginably fierce battle, repelled all invading enemies with what could only be described as divine power. As the performance concluded, Aziz applauded enthusiastically, clearly impressed. Turning to Turan, he eagerly asked for his thoughts. Turan responded with genuine admiration, praising the story as remarkable. Yet what struck him most was Cain's humility. The man himself had once claimed to be nothing more than an ordinary knight. That contrast only deepened Turan's anticipation. The next time they met, he resolved to ask Cain directly whether such a tale was true. The following morning, as dawn broke, Turan opened his eyes and found himself staring at a familiar sight. Lem was already there, crouched beside his bed with the same unwavering gaze as always. His sudden presence was enough to leave Turan momentarily speechless. Calmly, Lem asked if he had rested well, then explained that he had been thinking about Turan's potential since the previous day. Convinced of his promise, he had decided to train him personally. A body, he stated firmly, did not grow stronger through rest, it required constant tempering. Understanding that such training would benefit him far more than idle wandering, Turan accepted without hesitation. At that very moment, Aziz burst into the room, eager to share news of an exciting performance happening that day. But his enthusiasm vanished the instant he noticed Lam. The man's steady, imposing presence was enough to send a chill down his spine. Lam turned to him and suggested that he join their training, remarking that it might do some good for his weak body. Aziz immediately refused, stumbling over his words as he claimed he had not yet recovered from the previous day's outing. Without waiting for further discussion, he hurriedly retreated, fleeing the room in near panic. Watching him go, Turan could not help but feel confused by his reaction. That confusion did not last long. The moment Turan experienced Lam's training firsthand, he understood exactly why Aziz had run away. His body trembled under the strain as every muscle screamed in protest. Observing him closely, Lam spoke in a steady voice, asking if he could not hear his body crying out. If he could not endure even this level of pain, then his will would inevitably be ruled by weakness. He ordered him to continue, declaring that the current exercise would be the last. Yet by the time Turan completed that last repetition, he collapsed onto the ground, utterly drained. When asked if he was tired, Turan admitted that he was indeed exhausted. Lam, however, only smiled faintly, remarking that he should be grateful. As a wizard, this level of training was barely sufficient. Puzzled, Turan questioned whether it would be different if he were not a wizard. Lem explained that ordinary people, no matter how hard they trained, would eventually weaken with time. They needed constant effort just to maintain their condition. Wizards, however, were different. The power of magic sustained their bodies, preserving them in an optimal state. Once they achieved progress, it would not easily fade. Hearing this, Turan began to grasp the deeper meaning behind the training. Before he could recover fully, Lam declared that he had rested enough and instructed him to begin learning weapon techniques. Turan wanted to protest, but Lam's words left no room for argument. His body, pushed beyond its limits, responded with sharp pain as his muscles strained and tore under the relentless exercises. Day after day, this routine continued, filling Turan's life with purpose and intensity. Mornings were devoted to physical conditioning and weapon training under Lam's strict guidance, while evenings were spent refining magical techniques alongside Misha. Without realizing it, 3 weeks passed in this demanding yet fulfilling cycle. One evening, as Turan practiced, a bolt of lightning struck just beside the center of his target. He let out a quiet sigh of frustration. Another miss. Misha, observing him, commented that he seemed to be struggling more than expected. Turan admitted helplessly that he was not from Albion, implying that the technique did not come naturally to him. Misha wanted to help, but found herself at a loss. For her, lightning magic was instinctive. It struck its mark the moment she cast it. Teaching something so innate proved unexpectedly difficult. At that moment, a voice called out to Misha, breaking the rhythm of their training. The speaker approached them, his presence carrying a certain authority. After briefly glancing at Turan, he questioned who he was. Misha immediately stepped forward, positioning herself in front of Turan with a cold, protective tone. She told the man it was none of his concern and demanded to know why he was there, reminding him that she had already instructed the main house not to disturb her during her rest. The man remained composed as he delivered his message. The head of the family was summoning her. The reason, he explained, was urgent. Dark elves had begun rampaging across the southern regions. They had already seized 3 cities and were now gathering an expeditionary force. The moment those words were spoken, Turan's expression hardened. The weight of the situation was unmistakable, and the calm rhythm of their days seemed ready to shatter. After listening to everything, Mesa said, "I see. Tell them I'll be back soon." Then she turned to Turan and added, "I think I need to go. Oh, speaking of which, I should collect the payment for that disgusting decomposition magic." Right after that, she clasped her hands together and, looking directly at Turan, asked, "Did you know that electricity flows through the human body as well?" Hearing this, Turan replied in confusion, "Electricity?" He clearly didn't understand what she meant. Mesa responded calmly, "You didn't know? Well, there's no way you would, since this is the secret of the Arabian house. How about we consider your debt paid if I teach this to you properly? It'll definitely be a great help." Turan thought for a moment before answering, "I suppose so." Mesa then began explaining, her tone steady as she shared everything she knew. When a person sees or feels something, that part sends a tiny electrical signal to the brain. If it's through the eyes, the signal travels from the eyes to the brain. And if it's a smell, it goes from the nose to the brain. She continued describing the process in detail, revealing knowledge that seemed both mysterious and profound. Turan listened carefully to every single word, fully focused on her explanation. Then, as if trying to grasp the concept more deeply, he slowly closed his eyes. Concentrating, he repeated the idea in his mind, a tiny electrical signal, as he tried to understand the meaning behind her words. This electricity flows throughout the entire body. If I accelerate the electrical signals transmitted through those pathways. As those words lingered, the change became visible. The same electricity seemed to surge across his face, faint at first but rapidly intensifying. In the very next moment, his eyes began to glow, crackling with a thunder-like energy. The atmosphere around him fell into an unnatural silence, as if everything had been stilled by the sudden surge of power. Standing there, Turan found himself facing Mesa. She looked at him calmly and asked, "So, how do you feel now?" Turan stood there, almost dazed, as if he had been pulled into an entirely unfamiliar state. Inside his mind, a single thought echoed in confusion: what is this? Suddenly, a sharp pain shot through his head. He immediately grabbed it, struggling to endure the intense headache that followed the overwhelming sensation. Mesa, however, spoke in a composed and almost casual tone. "Looks like you pulled it off. That's because you poured out your mana so recklessly. It'll probably be hard to adjust right now because of the headache, but once you get used to it, you'll be able to maintain it for quite a while." Hearing this, Turan could barely process everything he was experiencing. Still trying to make sense of it, he muttered, "This, no matter how much I think about it, this seems far too valuable compared to what I gave you." At that, Mesa let out a faint, amused smile as she began to rise into the air. "This is simply an investment," she said, "since you seem to have some talent." Turan watched her from below as she continued, "If you end up learning an even more incredible spell in the future, I'll collect it all back along with what you owe me for this." With that, Mesa flew away swiftly, disappearing from the scene in an instant. The scene then shifted. A clear sky spread overhead, calm and vast, contrasting sharply with what had just happened. Below it, a large crowd of people could be seen gathered together in one place, creating a sense of unrest and anticipation. As the moment unfolded, we are told that this place is Morgan City, the center of the Dakine Plains. A massive crowd had gathered there, and every single person was shouting slogans in unison. their voices echoing through the air. Through Ishis, we are given the impression of the scene. It's just a departure ceremony to hunt dark elves, but it feels like a victory parade. Just look at their enthusiasm. As he spoke, his gaze shifted forward, and suddenly he spotted someone riding on horseback. His expression lit up with excitement as he called out, "It's Mason. Mason, over here." However, before he could act any further, a man grabbed his hand firmly and said, "Ashish, maintain your composure as a noble." Ashish tried to respond, his voice filled with emotion. "Father." But yet the words failed to come out completely, as if he was unable to express what he truly wanted to say. At that moment, a loud announcement rang through the area. "The head of the house is entering." Instantly, the entire atmosphere fell silent. The soldiers present snapped into attention, standing perfectly still with disciplined precision. Turan, observing everything, thought to himself, "That person is the current head of the Arabian house, Badal Arabian." The man looked forward, his striking blue eyes visible even from a distance. But something about his condition seemed off. Noticing this, Turan quietly said, "Ashish, the head of the house doesn't look well at all. He's so pale. Could his health be failing?" Ashish replied, "I heard rumors that he was severely injured while fighting the head of the Zahar house in the past. But since that was a long time ago, maybe it's just because of his old age." On the other side, the head of the family slowly raised his hand. In response, every soldier present moved as one, their unity absolute. All eyes then turned upward toward the sky. There, an ominous sight unfolded. The entire sky had been swallowed by a spreading blackness. The atmosphere grew increasingly terrifying, heavy with an unspoken tension. Within those dark clouds, golden thunder began to crackle violently, lighting up the heavens in flashes of brilliance. Everyone watched in awe, and soon, their voices rose again, louder than before, chanting with unwavering devotion, "Long live Arabian Lord of Thunder, protect your descendants." As those words echoed through the crowd, Turan watched the overwhelming display before him and thought to himself, "This is the power of Arabian." Even with his body in such poor condition, he easily covers the entire area, the absolute pinnacle of magic reached by a human. One day, I will reach it as well. The scene then shifted, and we see a person holding out a bracelet in his hand. Offering it forward, he said, "Here you go." Then he explained, "Just wearing it increases your physical stamina a bit, and if you inject mana into it, that level increases even further. At its limit, it reaches a level similar to the nobles of the Guardian bloodline." But he paused briefly before continuing, "It consumes a lot of mana, so it's best not to maintain it for too long." Turan looked at the item with clear amazement and said, "This is truly an incredible treasure. An object like this probably wouldn't be common even among the great houses. It's an exceptionally well-made item." At that moment, Base's aunt spoke up. Looking at him, she asked, "Turan, do you have any interest in formally joining our house?" It was something Ashish had already mentioned before. However, without hesitation, Turan replied, "I'm very grateful for the offer, but I think that would be difficult." Hearing this, the aunt nodded calmly and said, "I see. I've already heard the stories from Ashish. He said you have a lot to do, so you'd have a hard time settling down in one place. Just consider it an old woman's lingering attachments." After listening to her words, Turan spoke sincerely, "I will never forget the hospitality I received from you, madam. Ashish and the Berk family will be my friends forever." The aunt looked at Turan and said gently, "Yes, that is enough." Soon after, Turan began to leave the place. As he stepped outside, he found that both the instructor and Ashish had come to see him off. At that moment, a knight approached and tossed a weapon toward him, saying, "Keep this with you. It's a magical device. It doesn't have any major functions, but it's durable, and the blade is quite sharp." Turan caught it and replied sincerely, "Thank you." He carefully stored it in his space, then turned toward the instructor and with respect in his voice, finally addressed him as master. The instructor simply smiled in response, and soon after, he left the place without another word. Ashish, however, was still there. He stepped forward and handed Turan a set of clothes. "This is for you," he said. Looking at it, Turan asked, "What's this?" Ashish explained, "Didn't you say you were jealous of my clothes? They don't get dirty easily, and if they're lightly torn, they mend themselves. Here it's a shirt and some pants." He had brought the entire set just for him. Turan looked at him, slightly surprised, and seeing his reaction, Ashish smiled and said, "You're a good friend, Turan. Not just because you saved my life, but because spending time with you and seeing the way you live gave me a lot to think about." After a brief pause, he asked, "So, where are you planning to go now?" Turan answered simply, "East, first." Hearing that, Ashish let out a long breath and said, "So, Carmine, if it's over there, I've been there too. If you can avoid it, don't take a ship. The waves are truly the worst. Even the wine glasses end up dancing." As he walked along the road, Turan found himself lost in thought. I would have to brave those waves to reach the land of Zahar, the Elril desert. But deep down, he knew he couldn't say that out loud. Instead, the words he remembered echoed in his mind well. "Someone as stubborn as you won't starve to death anywhere. Return safely and pay me back for this cloak." "Got it." "Yeah." he had answered back then. Now, he continued moving forward without stopping. The journey carried him across many places, each step taking him farther away. As he walked, a thought surfaced again in his mind alone again. Shall we run? In the very next moment, he burst forward with incredible speed. He dashed through crowds of people, weaving past them so quickly that they could only turn their heads in shock, watching him pass by like a fleeting shadow. His pace was extraordinary. With that same speed, he crossed the entire city, moved past open stretches of land, and kept going until he finally came to a stop at a distant location. There, standing still for the first time in a while, he lifted his gaze and saw a massive mountain rising before him. Taking a deep breath, he steadied himself, then began walking straight into it, pressing forward without hesitation. As he advanced further, something caught his attention. He paused slightly, narrowing his senses. The smell of a campfire? He wondered, but almost immediately, he corrected himself. No, it's something far more disgusting. The smell of burning flesh. Moving closer, the truth revealed itself. He arrived at a place that had been completely devastated. Houses had been burned down to nothing but charred remains, and scattered all around were lifeless bodies. The entire area carried the heavy silence of destruction. Seeing this, Turan's thoughts grew darker. Could they have been attacked by bandits? The dark elves shouldn't have come this far. As he continued moving through the area, Turan looked around at the ruined houses. The sight left him deeply unsettled, a quiet sadness settling over him as he took in the destruction. After a moment, he stepped inside one of the damaged homes. While searching the interior, he discovered a basement. Without hesitation, he tried to open it, and after some effort, the door finally gave way. Inside, he found a young girl, just a small child, huddled in fear. The moment the door opened, she began to cry, terrified by the sudden intrusion. Turan immediately moved down toward her, raising his hands to show he meant no harm. In a calm voice, he said, "Wait, calm down. I'm not an enemy. I came to help." The child, still trembling and overwhelmed, looked at him and asked hesitantly, "Really?" "Yes," Turan replied gently. "Can you tell me what happened?" Fighting through her fear, the girl managed to speak. "He killed everyone." "That mage?" Turan repeated, clearly surprised by what he had just heard. But before she could say anything more, the girl suddenly collapsed, losing consciousness. Turan quickly caught her and checked her condition. Fortunately, it's nothing serious, he thought to himself. She must just be exhausted from being trapped in the basement for so long. First, I need to get this child somewhere safe. Carefully lifting her, he carried her outside. But the moment he stepped out, a sharp tension filled the air. Someone had already taken aim at him. A girl stood at a distance, her bow drawn, an arrow pointed straight at him. "I found you," she said coldly. She appeared to wield both fire and ice, her presence radiating danger. Her voice rose sharply as she shouted, "On your knees, you murderous bastard." It was clear that she had misunderstood the situation. Yet despite the accusation and the threat, Turan remained calm and composed, not showing even the slightest sign of panic as he faced her. The archer pointed her bow at Turan and shouted angrily, "On your knees, you damn murderer." But even after hearing her accusation, Turan remained completely calm. He didn't lose his composure for even a moment. On the other side, the archer yelled again, her voice filled with rage and disbelief. "Wasn't this massacre enough for you? And now you're even trying to kidnap a little child." At the same time, the fire magician standing beside her warned sharply, "Don't move from where you are. If you do, what happens next won't be pleasant." Turan, still maintaining his calm demeanor, tried to explain the situation. "Wait, this is a misunderstanding," he said, attempting to reason with them. But before his words could reach them, the fire magician suddenly lost control. In his nervousness, he accidentally released his attack forward. The blazing spell shot straight ahead at high speed, heading directly toward Turan and the little girl. In the next instant, a massive explosion erupted. Seeing this, the archer's eyes widened in shock and fury. She immediately turned toward the fire magician and shouted, "Gil, you idiot." There was a child there. Panicking, the magician stammered, "Oh no, it was an accident. I was so nervous that I..." But as the archer turned her gaze forward again, she froze. What she saw left her completely stunned. Someone had blocked the attack, stopped it entirely using just a single hand. It was Turan. He stood there, having activated his artifact, completely unharmed. Not a single scratch could be seen on his body. Calmly, almost as if it were nothing, Turan said, "I didn't think I'd have to use this so soon." The members of the archer's team stared at him in disbelief. He blocked that magic with just his body? One of them whispered in shock. Meanwhile, the archer girl couldn't stop her thoughts from racing. What kind of defensive magic is that? Could it be a bloodline ability? The confusion and astonishment were clearly visible on her face. As all eyes remained fixed on him, Turan spoke once more, his voice steady but firm. "I'm not the one who attacked this village. I'll say it again, this is all a misunderstanding. But if you attack me again..." His tone grew colder, carrying a quiet warning. "I won't just defend myself." Hearing his statement, the archer began to feel a slight sense of fear. None of them knew anything about Turan's true power, and that uncertainty made him even more intimidating. Her gaze slowly shifted toward the little girl, who was now standing quietly beside Turan. calm and unharmed. After taking a moment to process everything, the archer finally spoke, her tone no longer as aggressive as before. That makes sense. There'd be no reason to cause such a tragedy, and then stay here just to save a child. Then, lowering her weapon slightly, she introduced herself. My name is Bissen. And yours? Turan simply replied with his name. After hearing it, Bissen looked at him carefully and said, even if the circumstantial evidence says otherwise, how can I believe you? Turan, still composed, answered without hesitation. Ask her when she wakes up. It seems she saw the real culprit. Bissen's eyes widened in surprise. What? She saw the arsonist. Turan repeated the words slowly, as if confirming it himself. The arsonist? Noticing his reaction, Bissen frowned slightly and said, don't tell me you don't know who he is. Turan calmly admitted that he didn't. At this, Bissen explained, her voice turning serious. He's the mad mage who committed this atrocity. For the past few months, he's been periodically attacking isolated villages, tying up the residents and burning them alive. Since there are no survivors, we don't even know his gender. All we know about this person is that they call him the arsonist. Just then, the little girl stirred and slowly spoke, her voice weak but clear. Well, he was wearing a red cloak and had a beard. He looked scary, like a lumberjack. All of the archer's companions listened carefully to her words, taking in every detail. The archer herself glanced back at Turan, her expression softening. After a brief pause, she stepped closer to him along with her team. I'm sorry, she said sincerely. We were rude because we were too impatient. It was clearly my mistake to point a weapon at you. The fire magician also lowered his head slightly and added, I'm sorry too. Watching this, Turan thought to himself, even among nobles, some let their sense of duty override their reason. You were an honest and good leader. Then, speaking to them calmly, he said, since you were concerned about the child's health first, that's what matters. So, did you come here to capture the arsonist? Bissen nodded. Yes, since someone was at the site of a fresh fire. I thought we had finally caught the culprit this time, but it turned out like this. Still, now that we have a description, we'll catch him soon. We have a natural tracker among us. Turan raised an eyebrow, slightly surprised. A tracker? Don't tell me. Are you from the Zahar family? Then why are you in a place like this? Bissen immediately lifted her hand and replied with confidence. No, I'm Bissen Carmine, of the Carmine family. I came from Abia, and these are my friends from our vassal families. Bissen continued. Usha here is a descendant of someone whose ancestors once mixed blood with a Zahar noble. That bloodline manifested only weakly. She's good at tracking magic, but has no talent for concealment. In the family, they call it a primitive bloodline. She paused for a moment, then looked directly at Turan with a more serious expression. More importantly, Mr. Turan, I have a request for you. Could you help us hunt down the arsonist? You can take the entire reward for capturing him. I'll even give you my share of the mana. All I need is to earn the merit for this mission. After hearing everything, Turan asked calmly, this arsonist, do you know his power level? Bissen nodded and replied, he's definitely a noble level mage. Some of the villages he attacked were protected by several knights, and yet, they were all killed. Hearing this, Turan fell into thought. Killed several knights. Maybe he's exactly the kind of opponent I need right now. The weak demonic beast along the road don't increase my strength anymore. After a brief pause, he gave his answer. Fine. A faint smile appeared on Bissen's face. Turan then added, first, let's get the child to safety. Soon after, they traveled to another place. There, they handed over some money to a man, saying, here, take this. It's enough to raise this child until they're grown. The man quickly assured them, of course, you can count on me. His body suddenly began to tremble strangely, as if something was wrong. Right after that, the scene shifted back to the same village, the one that had been completely destroyed. After that, the team's tracker stepped forward and began using her ability, carefully scanning the surroundings, guiding everyone ahead. She said, we still need to look a bit more. All right, let's move. Bissen immediately asked, which way? Without hesitation, the tracker continued leading them forward, her focus unwavering. Watching her work, Turan grew curious and asked, how exactly are you tracking him? She replied calmly, first, I looked for human footprints, and when they reached the main road, I followed the scent of ash. If he hasn't changed clothes, he'll still be covered in ash residue. Hearing this, Turan thought to himself, quite professional. She couldn't find him before because she didn't even know his gender. Just then, the tracker suddenly stopped and said, found it. Everyone immediately began following her. From behind, Bissen called out, wait, Usha, slow down a bit. Soon, the scene shifted to a mountainous area. The terrain was rough and quiet, and the group finally came to a halt there. Bissen turned back and said, Mr. Turan, come to the front with me. The rest of you, stay back. With that, the two of them moved forward, holding glowing spheres in their hands that lit up the dark path ahead. As they advanced, Bissen asked the tracker in a low voice, is someone inside? Usha hesitated slightly, as if sensing something unsettling, then answered, there's one person. Hearing this, they all began moving forward again, entering a cave. After a short while, they finally reached their destination standing before the very magician they had been searching for all this time. All eyes turned toward him. The man looked at them calmly and spoke in an almost casual tone. What brings you gentlemen to such an isolated place? But here, Turan didn't stay silent at all. Without hesitation, he asked the team behind him, "Is that the arsonist?" The tracking girl focused for a moment before replying, "I'm picking up a strange scent. It's him." Bissen immediately readied her bow and said firmly, "It must be. I'll confirm it." She stepped forward slightly and called out, "Are you the one who kidnapped and burned the villagers nearby?" The man tilted his head, acting confused. "I'm not quite sure what you mean," he replied calmly. But in the very next moment, he suddenly activated his magic. Flames burst forward, and a violent explosion shook the area. The force of the blast pushed several members of the team backward. However, Turan and Bissen remained exactly where they stood. Turan had already activated his artifact once again, creating a protective force field around them. Seeing this, even the magician looked surprised. Taking advantage of that brief moment, Bissen released an arrow straight toward him. The shot was precise. It struck the dark mage in the leg. The impact forced him down onto one knee. But he didn't stop there. Almost instantly, he activated his bloodline ability. The ground began to tremble as he used earth manipulation, shaping the terrain itself. Massive, giant hands of rock rose from the ground, forming around him. Seeing this, Turan thought, earth manipulation. I thought he had a flame bloodline. The enormous hands then lunged toward Turan, attacking him relentlessly. He moved quickly, trying to evade their crushing blows. But the dark magician continued his assault without pause. In response, Turan acted instantly. Gathering his strength, he launched a powerful rock shot straight at the enemy. The attack hit with force, shattering one of the giant stone hands completely. And then, without wasting a second, Turan activated another spell, this time lightning magic. Sparks of electricity began crackling violently around his hands, growing brighter and more intense with each passing moment. As he unleashed the attack, the bolt struck the dark magician with tremendous force. The man screamed loudly in agony, his voice echoing through the cave, before collapsing straight to the ground. Seeing this, Bissen quickly asked, "Did you take him down?" Turan, still focused, replied calmly, "Most likely. I'll handle this one. Please check on the others." Without delay, he scattered several small seeds around the fallen mage. Almost instantly, they sprouted at an unnatural speed, growing into thick, twisting plants that wrapped tightly around the man's body, binding him completely. With his movement restrained, Turan stepped forward, weapon in hand, and stood right in front of him. "I've sealed his sight and movement. It's over," he said in a cold, controlled tone. Then, commanding sharply, he added, "Get up now." In the next moment, Turan moved behind him and pressed a blade against his neck. "Don't move," he warned. "Release any more mana, and I'll kill you on the spot." The dark magician, clearly shaken, asked in a trembling voice, "Who are you? How did you find this place?" Turan answered without hesitation, "We have our ways. Now tell me you're the arsonist, right?" At first, the man said nothing, but then, without warning, Turan drove his weapon into the man's knee. A piercing scream tore out of him as pain overwhelmed his body. "Answer me," Turan demanded coldly. "Why is a rogue noble burning innocent villagers alive?" In his mind, Turan thought, a murderer deserves no mercy. Shaking with fear and pain, the dark magician finally spoke. God told me to." He stammered desperately. "If I burn the flesh and souls of sinners, I can reach him." Hearing this, the entire group of archers was stunned. "What?" they exclaimed in disbelief. The dark magician continued, his voice unstable and filled with fanatic desperation. "God taught me the secret to obtaining other bloodlines. If I burn a few more humans, I'll finally obtain the flame bloodline." Bissen turned away in disbelief, her expression filled with shock and disgust. "Isn't this just madness?" she said. "How could anyone obtain an innate bloodline like that, to commit such massacres for reasons so ridiculous?" Meanwhile, on the other side, Turan's anger had reached an entirely different level. As he listened, something from his past resurfaced in his mind, a memory of someone once saying, "Even commoners gain power by killing demonic beasts. I've seen many mages do it." Back in the present, the dark magician continued muttering obsessively, "I just need to burn a few more, and then I'll have the power of flames." Turan's expression darkened as a realization began to form within him. This isn't just the delusion of a madman, he thought. The atmosphere around him seemed to shift, growing heavier as his anger deepened. "Perhaps I've discovered the secret of this world." Then, without wasting a single moment, Turan instantly cuts off the dark magician's head. Right after that, the lifeless body collapses to the ground in front of everyone. Seeing this, a few people start feeling uneasy. One man, whose condition had already worsened, is questioned by the others about what happened to him. Struggling to explain, he says, Bad Arabian. It feels like slaughtering livestock." Hearing this, the archer immediately snaps at him. "Don't say such foolish things. We all could have died here if things had gone wrong. And you're feeling sympathetic. Besides, when I think about how many people that bastard killed, dragging him away alive and making him suffer even more wouldn't have been enough." After this, Turan quietly turns around and starts heading outside. As he moves, one of his companions finds a book lying on the ground and hands it to him. Turan looks at it carefully and thinks to himself, This should be enough evidence that he's the burner. As he flips through the pages, he mutters, "These are combination formulas I've never seen before in my life." Did that voice claiming to be a god teach him all this too? He is still lost in thought when suddenly, from behind, the archer calls out, "Turan." She is calling him over for the next step, and soon after, all of them begin absorbing mana according to their own methods. At that moment, the scene shifts to a man speaking with admiration. "Congratulations, Miss Bisson. To think you managed to catch the burner. A new star has risen in House Carmen." Bisson calmly replies, "You flatter me." Then she turns to Turan and says, "We're planning to travel around a bit more while hunting some monsters. What about you, Turan?" She had already handed him his share of the money. In response, Turan answers without hesitation, "I'm planning to head straight to Abacha." Bisson speaks in a slightly lowered voice. "As I mentioned yesterday, what that guy told us." Hearing this, Turan calmly responds, "Yes, I won't go around blabbing about it elsewhere. Whether it's true or not, it would cause great chaos." After that, Bisson nods and says to him along with her team, "All right then, see you next time." With those words, everyone goes their separate ways. As Turan watches them leave, he quietly thinks to himself, "There's no need for me to mention that there isn't any definitive proof yet." He then continues on his own path. As he moves forward, the heat around him begins to intensify. It's clear he is passing through a desert region. He mutters, "It's getting more humid." Then, snapping his fingers, he observes the change in his abilities. The firepower has decreased, and mana consumption has increased. A small flame flickers in his hand as he studies it before adding, "It'll be tricky to handle fire magic here." But then he pauses. On the other hand, in his other hand, a large sphere of water forms with ease. Looking at it, he concludes, "Which means, is this Abacha?" The scene shifts to a port town where numerous ships are docked. Inside the town, a conversation unfolds between a group of sailors. One man asks, "Are you guys setting sail tomorrow?" Hearing this, a pilot with an eye patch replies, "That's right. We have to go to that dreadful and real desert again. Those merfolk along the route keep throwing harpoons at us, and last time, the bottom of the ship ended up looking like a honeycomb." Another man, surprised, asks, "Is it really that bad?" Sitting nearby, an old man adds with frustration, "And then there are those damn pirates." The one-eyed pilot continues complaining, "At this rate, we'll be paying out funeral expenses instead of sailors' wages. Damn it, we're desperate for a skilled knight." Just then, someone approaches. Them it's Turan. He stops right in front of the group and directly asks, "Excuse me, are you heading to the Enril Desert?" The one-eyed man looks at him and replies bluntly, "We're leaving tomorrow, but our ship isn't a cruise liner. We don't even have enough room for extra cargo right now. Taking on one person means leaving behind a barrel of boozan that goes against my principles." After that, Turan calmly places his hand over a cup. Seeing this, the tavern owner becomes confused and asks, "What exactly are you trying to do?" But before anyone can understand what's happening, the cup suddenly becomes completely covered, sealed in a strange and overwhelming way. Witnessing this unnatural display, the owner is visibly shaken, fear creeping into his expression. At the same time, one of the men nearby quickly stands up and says with respect, "What is a great knight doing in such a humble place? You can speak comfortably." Turan looks straight at them and replies without hesitation, "I'm the one asking to be hired here." Hearing this, the one-eyed man's attitude immediately softens, and he speaks more politely. "So, what brings Sir Knight to this place?" Turan answers directly, "I would like you to let me board a ship heading to the Enril Desert. I'm here as an employee, not a passenger. If pirates or merfolk attack, I will help fend them off. I'll use that as payment for my passage." After hearing this, the one-eyed man sighs and explains honestly, "It seems you've already overheard, but our ship is very poor. Forget about a measly salary, we don't even have the means to provide a room." Befitting a knight's status, completely unfazed, replies, "I don't care about the pay or the conditions. My goal is simply to get to the Enril Desert anyway." The one-eyed man pauses for a moment, then breaks into a grin and says, "Really? Then it's settled. Join us at once." Soon after, the scene shifts as Turan is welcomed aboard their ship. But suddenly, the focus changes to a completely different place, one filled with chaos. Several houses are burning, flames rising high into the sky. A brutal attack by dark elves is underway. People are desperately trying to fight back, but they are clearly struggling. A young master, in particular, is unable to fight properly, overwhelmed by the situation. At that very moment, a dark elf charges rapidly toward Ashiz, closing the distance in an instant. Just as things seem hopeless, a flash of golden lightning streaks across the sky. In the blink of an eye, every monster in the surrounding area is struck down. Then, from within that fading light, Mesa makes her entrance. Seeing her, the young man breathes in relief and says, "Thank you, my lady." Mesa looks at him calmly and firmly replies, "Rejoin the unit." Ashiz immediately responds, "Yes, ma'am," and rushes forward without wasting a second, returning to the battlefield. Meanwhile, Mesa remains standing there, her presence calm yet commanding. Just then, a man approaches her from behind and asks with concern, "Are you hurt anywhere?" This man is introduced as Vice Captain Kadram Arabian. When Mesa calmly shakes her head, indicating she's fine, he continues. Don't push yourself too hard. You are far more precious than the lives of a knight or two. However, Mesa shows no sign of concern for herself and replies firmly. I'm fine. This is nothing. More importantly, how is the battle going? Kadram answers, not bad. At this rate, this area will be reclaimed soon, though we haven't found the tunnels yet. Hearing this, Mesa gives a slightly sharp response, almost like a subtle taunt, as she begins to walk past him. Let me know when you find them. I'll go there myself. Watching her leave, her uncle can't hide his frustration. Irritated, he mutters to himself, my brother raised that child far too recklessly. At this rate, she'd end up just like her mother and younger brother. The scene then shifts back to the ship. Turan is standing quietly at one spot, gazing out at the vast sea stretching endlessly before him. As the wind brushes past him, he sinks deep into his thoughts. Even if I arrive in the land of Zahar, I'm at a loss as to how I'll find any clues, without even knowing what my father's status is. There's no telling what might happen if I just barge into Zahar. The only clues I have are a few heirlooms and a portrait of my mother's face. I wonder how long it'll take to find information about my mother with just that. Just then, someone taps him on the shoulder from behind. It's the one-eyed man again. With a light tone, he says, Sir Knight, if you keep staring like that, you'll burn a hole in the seabed. What's got you so deep in thought? Turan snaps out of his thoughts and replies calmly, I was just thinking about how vast the ocean is. The one-eyed man nods with a faint smile and says, it's vast indeed. Very vast, he continues, speaking in a casual tone. I heard landfolk get nauseous just by looking at that vastness. Are you handling seasickness all right? Oh, by the way, I heard you're even learning seafaring from our bosun. A noble Sir Knight learning everything from tying ropes to handling the sails. He seemed quite excited that you're picking it all up. Hearing this, Turan replies simply, I just thought it'd be good for me to have that knowledge. And it's more interesting than I expected. Just then, another crew member calls out loudly to everyone. It's meal time. At that, the one-eyed man claps his hands and says, now, let's eat before we work. Everyone, to the dining hall. Soon, all the crew members gather and begin eating together. As Turan sits with them, an old man approaches him and says, it's not as good as food on land, but it's a relief they didn't leave out this pickled cabbage. Because if it weren't for this, we all would have died of gum disease long ago. Turan looks at him with curiosity and asks, gum disease? The old man nods and explains, yes, it's a disease where your gums bleed and you eventually die. But you can recover if you eat sour food. Fruit spoils quickly at sea, so pickled cabbage is the best option, though it tastes like crap. Listening to this, Turan says with genuine interest, that's fascinating. How did you come to know such a thing? The old man shrugs and replies, well, I'm sure someone figured it out at some point, and then it just spread. I heard that before this was discovered, people even used to eat murfik raw. Hearing that, Turan reacts with a quiet, surprised oh. At that moment, a crew member standing high above suddenly shouts out an urgent announcement, a ship. 2 o'clock ahead, a medium-sized vessel. Hearing this, someone immediately asks in alarm, what? Is it pirates? The lookout squints into the distance and replies, I don't know. There's no house crest flying on it. Upon hearing that, the old man nearby mutters with a grim feeling. I've got a bad feeling about this. They're probably pirates. It's such a nice day without any rain, things have been going way too smoothly. Without wasting another second, the captain's voice rings out sharply. First, prepare for battle. At once, the entire crew springs into action, rushing toward their weapons and positions. The old man then turns toward the one-eyed captain and asks anxiously, what should we do, Captain? Should we try to lose them? They're a bit faster than us. If they chase us for long, we might get caught. If the wind favors us, we might be able to dock at a nearby island before they catch up. Instead of answering immediately, the captain turns to Turan and asks, is this situation all right for you? Turan replies calmly, as long as there are no knights or nobles among them, there's no problem. Hearing this, the captain's expression hardens as he gives his order, very well. Turn the ship. We're engaging. The crew erupts with energy, shouting and cheering Turan's name, their fear replaced with fierce determination as they cry out to strike down the enemy. At the same time, the scene shifts to the opposing ship, where the pirates are already fully prepared, armed and waiting. Watching them from afar, Turan quietly asks, will they really spare us if we surrender? The captain lets out a bitter laugh and responds, this throwing us into the sea after cutting off our legs count? Turan nods slightly and says, just as I thought. With that, he moves forward without hesitation and boards the pirate's ship. The pirates, startled by his sudden appearance, begin shouting in confusion, who the hell is that? And kill him. But before they can react properly, countless ice shards surge forward toward them. In an instant, chaos erupts as the pirates are struck down one after another. Watching them fall, Turan speaks coldly, if they're those kinds of people, then there's no need to go easy on them. At that moment, his expression changes completely, becoming sharp and merciless. A terrifying amount of energy begins to pour out from his body, overwhelming the surroundings as he unleashes his full power. After many pirates had already been killed, the ones who remained turned their eyes toward Turan, their faces filled with anger. At the same time, Some of them were clearly afraid, sensing this fear spreading among them. One man stepped forward and shouted loudly to everyone, "Don't be afraid, you idiots. If we don't kill him, we're the ones who'll die." Hearing his words, the hesitation among the pirates disappeared almost instantly. Driven by desperation, all of them charged forward at once, raising their weapons and rushing toward Turan to attack him together. Turan, however, stood there calmly, watching everything unfold with a cold and composed expression, as if none of it truly bothered him. At that moment, a thin strand of ice suddenly formed in front of him and shot forward. Before the pirates could even reach him, that icy strand swiftly shaped itself into a sword right in his hand. Without wasting a second, Turan swung at once, and with just that single attack, several pirates were cut down instantly. Seeing this, a voice from behind shouted, "Don't stop. Finish him here." Encouraged again, a few more pirates rushed forward to attack him. But just like the others, they were killed in an instant, unable to even land a proper hit. Another pirate came charging with a spear, aiming straight for Turan. Turan immediately blocked the incoming strike with precision, then, in one smooth motion, turned the same spear against its owner and killed him on the spot. Even so, there were still many pirates surrounding him, and handling all of them at once was not entirely effortless. Realizing this, Turan unleashed a powerful attack straight ahead. The force of it wiped out multiple pirates in a single blow, and as their bodies fell, strange ice crystals began to emerge from them, spreading rapidly. Suddenly, in the middle of the chaos, one pirate managed to sneak up from behind and grab Turan tightly, trying to restrain him. He raised a knife, preparing to stab Turan in the neck, but just as he was about to strike, ice crystals started forming from his own body as well, spreading uncontrollably and making it impossible for him to move properly. Even though he struggled, the man shouted to the others, "I've got him. Hurry up and attack him. Kill him now." Hearing this, two more pirates rushed forward, gripping their weapons tightly as they prepared to strike. Turan, still being held from behind, slowly turned his gaze toward the man restraining him. His eyes were filled with intense anger, cold and terrifying. The pirate, still trying to hold him in place despite the ice creeping over his body, spoke in a strained voice, "The knife won't go in." But that man had no idea what was about to happen next. In that very moment, Turan moved, and in a flash, he killed not only the man holding him from behind but also the two pirates charging at him from the front. Everything happened so quickly that none of them could even react. His movements were sharp, precise, and almost impossible to follow. As the fight continued, we see him cutting down more and more pirates without pause. Blood splashed across his body, staining him from head to toe. Yet somehow it only made him look even colder and more intimidating. There was a chilling calmness in his expression, and the sheer presence he carried made him seem almost untouchable. Before long, every single pirate had been killed. Not one was left standing. From Turan's body, an overwhelming killing intent radiated outward, heavy enough to make anyone nearby feel uneasy. Just then, sailors from another ship began throwing ropes across, so they could make their way over. As they arrived and witnessed the aftermath, one of them couldn't help but say, "You really clean house here." Soon after, the ship's captain approached with his crew, stepping forward as he observed the scene. Looking at Turan, he spoke in a half-joking yet impressed tone. "Do you work as a janitor on the side? If you tidy up this perfectly, my sailors won't have anything left to do. This is incredible. Long live the knight." Hearing this, the rest of the crew began shouting the same words over and over again, their voices filled with admiration and excitement. The captain then looked around at the fallen pirates and added, "You bastards. Serves you right." After that, one of the crew members stepped forward and addressed Turan respectfully. "Sir Knight, why don't you see the ship's doctor first?" Turan calmly replied, "Don't worry. I'm not hurt at all. All of this is just pirate blood." A few moments later, some crew members came up to him with their report, explaining what they had discovered. One of them said, "Sir Turan, I've thoroughly searched every inch of those bastard ship." The scene then shifts to the captain's cabin, where the captain begins explaining the situation in more detail. "Well, that ship was a merchant vessel that disappeared from Abia a few years ago." After that, the ship's captain continued speaking, explaining the situation in a clear and matter-of-fact tone. "It seems the pirates captured it, gave it a new paint job, and were using it for their crimes. Typical of those unscrupulous scumbags. What do you plan to do, since you handle the fight all by yourself? The ownership rights belong entirely to you, Turan. Congratulations. You're the new owner of the ship." Even after hearing this, Turan showed no real excitement. He didn't look particularly thrilled or overwhelmed by the idea of suddenly owning such a large and valuable ship. Instead, he simply looked at the captain and asked in a straightforward, almost indifferent tone, "And what am I supposed to do with it?" Hearing that, the captain began laying out the possible options for him. "Well, you have a few options. You could take it back to Abia, find the original owner, and ask for a reward after a polite bow. Of course, between the paperwork and dealing with bureaucrats, a month or two would pass in the blink of an eye. Or you could go to the El Real Desert and sell it." But he paused briefly before continuing, offering, what he believed was the best course of action. In my opinion, the best move is to sell it at the North Sea archipelago. It's on our way. That place is always desperate for ships, and naturally, goods sell for the highest price to those who need them most. However, to move a ship of this size, I have to use my own sailors. Turan listened carefully, and then responded calmly, thinking practically about the situation. Anyway, it's not like I can sail that ship alone, right? If I use your men, I'll have to pay the price. Hearing this, the captain let out a laugh, clearly pleased with Turan's reasoning. Haha, as expected, you're a reasonable man then. With a slight smile he added, in that case, if you could set aside a portion of the profits as a service fee for the crew, just enough for their labor. Turan, maintaining a formal and composed tone, made a direct proposal. Can I leave everything to you, including the sail, for a 20% cut? The captain's smile widened as he heard this offer. Without hesitation, he replied, how could I refuse? Since I know plenty of people there, I'll make sure we get a great price. Right after the captain said this, a crew member suddenly came running in, shouting loudly, Captain, there's a mermaid here. A mermaid. Hearing this, the captain was completely taken aback. His expression changed instantly as he exclaimed, what now? Even mermaids are attacking us? The man quickly shook his head and clarified, that's not it. The pirates captured a mermaid and were keeping it prisoner down in the ship's hold. Both the captain and Turan were surprised upon hearing this unexpected news. Without wasting time, they immediately headed outside to see it for themselves. At that moment, the ship was still being cleaned, with crew members busy clearing the aftermath of the battle. An old sailor stepped forward and began guiding the captain toward the lower deck. As they walked, the captain asked, so, you're saying that precious little thing is inside? The old man replied, yes, I haven't gone in to see for myself yet. I just got the report. Good work, the captain said, before turning his face toward Turan. With a curious smile, he added, Sir Turan, want to go take a look at this precious little thing? Turan immediately agreed and walked along with him. But as they moved forward, he asked a practical question, but tell Emmy, do mermaids usually sell for a high price? The captain responded with a knowing tone, if it's a beautiful female. Those rich nobles on the mainland who have more money than sense lose their minds over anything mystical. They find it fascinating this way. Soon, they reached the door leading to the ship's hold. As it was open, Turan stepped inside first. What they saw in front of them, however, was not what they had expected. There, sitting before them, was a small, childlike figure, a young merman. Seeing him, the captain sighed and said, it's a shame, but it's a male. This won't be worth much at all. Those rich folks have zero interest in a merman. Well, unless it's something like the royalty from legends who can transform into fish. Hearing this, the merman immediately snapped back with anger and pride in his voice. How dare you call me just some male? I am Armani, the 47th Prince of North Estate. Show some respect, you filthy lamb plebeians. Turan, hearing this bold claim, turned to the captain and asked, is that brat claiming to be royalty? The captain observed the boy for a moment and replied, from the looks of it, it seems that way. Then, slightly narrowing his eyes, he added, he might be bluffing. I was thinking we might keep him alive to sell him instead of killing him. So, can you turn into a fish, Prince Triton? Hearing that, Armani immediately replied, I can't do that right now. The captain frowned and asked, why not? Armani, clearly irritated, shouted back, I'm tied up and out of the water. It's impossible. I can only transform if I'm in the sea and in perfect condition. The captain then turned slightly toward Turan and said in a low, skeptical tone, he's just trying to trick us so he can escape. At that moment, Turan began stepping forward, his presence growing heavier as he spoke coldly. What are you going to do? They say merfolk eat humans, don't they? The captain nodded. Yes. Hearing that, Turan replied without hesitation. Then I'll kill him. Since you said he's not worth any money anyway, it would be great if it were true. But, well, if we believe what this guy says and let him into the sea, and he just runs away, we'll be left here looking like fools. As he said this, a dark and overwhelming killing intent began to radiate from Turan once again. The air itself seemed to grow heavier as he slowly extended his hand toward Armani. Seeing this, Armani panicked and shouted, stop it. How dare you? But as Turan's hand kept moving closer, Armani's voice began to falter. Fear crept into his expression as he quickly added, I've never even thought about doing that. He looked directly into Turan's eyes and what he saw terrified him. Those eyes were completely cold, empty of hesitation, as if taking a life meant nothing at all. Real fear took over him, and in desperation, he shouted, if you let me live, I'll give you a treasure. A treasure. Turan paused slightly at that word. A treasure. Armani nodded quickly and continued, yes, a treasure. Something left by the gods of Freya you humans worship. With that, the scene shifts. We are shown a port where everyone has disembarked from the ship. The sailors who had come ashore were busy talking among themselves, discussing drinks and other plans after the long ordeal. Amidst this, the captain approached Turan and asked, so, have you reached a conclusion? Turan calmly replied, yes, fortunately, it doesn't seem to be very far from here. I'll go there and be back by tonight. The scene then transitions into night. Under the dim light, we see Turan heading out in a small boat, with Armani brought along as well. Armani, still bound in chains, looked annoyed and confused as he said, "Hey, what are these chains for? Do you think I'm going to run away? I am a prince. I keep my promises." There was no response from Turan. The silence made Armani uneasy, and after a moment, he spoke again. This time more seriously, nitrogen monoxide. "I'm serious. If there really is a treasure there, you'll let me go, right?" Turan gave a simple reply, "Yes." Soon, Armani guided him to the correct location. He said cautiously, "If you go there and get disappointed, don't blame me. It's a treasure of Freya, so by human standards, it should be incredible, but..." Turan cut him off calmly, "I get it. Just lead the way." After that, we see both of them on the boat, and without hesitation, Turan dives straight into the water, heading down to search for the treasure. As he descends deeper into the ocean, the surroundings grow darker and more mysterious. After going further down, something unusual appears before him. What look like ancient statues and fragments resembling snake-like creatures. However, it's unclear what exactly they are. They seem like broken remnants of something far older, almost as if they are part of some forgotten structure or relic. But their true nature is not yet fully revealed.